Chapter 138. Prepare a seat for storyteller Rin and inform the Imperial Kitchen that there will be one more person for dinner tonight. The Empress turned around and instructed Qing Yuan. Yes. Qing Yuan replied with a smile. A seat was a privilege that only a few high-ranking officials would receive. Now there was one more person. How do you feel now? The Empress asked after Rin Baqian sat down. Rin Baqian clenched his fist and said, There seems to be some changes but not much. After all, I have just started. Once you have started, it will be a smooth sailing journey. I have also prepared the medicinal ingredients for you. I will get someone to send them to you later. The Empress nodded her head slightly. It was a good thing that Rin Baqian had started practicing Rui visualization, but he still needed the Spirit Yuan pills from Lu Qi. With the Spirit Yuan pills, he could achieve twice the results with half the effort. At least, his cultivation speed would be much faster. Thank you, Your Majesty. Rin Baqian naturally did not know that the Empress was eyeing the pills from Lu Pinghai. If he knew, he would be in fear and trepidation. I can't give you any pointers for this Rui visualization that you are practicing. Take it slowly and don't be greedy. If there are any problems, I'm afraid it will not be easy to solve, the Empress said slowly. Rin Baqian nodded his head. There weren't many problems with this martial art. However, the Empress's words were a form of concern for him. After all, with her status, why would she say such words? This made him feel warm in his heart. After that night's banquet, the Empress's attitude towards him had indeed changed a lot. Your Majesty, now that I have started practicing, I can already go and take a look at the iron mine. I am greatly favored by Your Majesty and it is difficult for me to repay you. I can only do what I can, Rin Baqian said after thinking for a while. All right, but you have just started practicing. Consolidate your foundation for a few days before setting off. If there is anything you don't understand, you can ask me. And that story of yours, you always tell it halfway. If you leave, I don't know how long it will take for me to finish listening to it. I am afraid that I will forget it after a long time. Finish the story in these few days. The Empress's cold voice was heard and Rin Baqian nodded his head continuously. Not long after, dinner was served. In the palace, the two of them sat at a table, surrounded by palace lanterns. The light was not very bright and it was only slightly brighter near the two of them. Qing Yuan and Hong Luan were far away, and for a moment, it felt as if there were only the two of them in the huge palace. Rin Baqian didn't say anything. He only raised his head from time to time to look at the Empress. When he saw where she was looking at, he would push the dishes over. An indescribable atmosphere filled the air between the two of them. There was a little warmth that made Rin Baqian's heart beat a little faster. After all, the Empress in front of him was a peerless beauty. Coupled with her status and strength, she was a great temptation to anyone. And now it was right in front of him. However, when he thought about how the Empress could crush him to death with just one finger, Rin Baqian felt that it would be better for him to behave himself. Go ahead and eat. You don't have to stare at me. The Empress raised her head and looked at him. The look in her phoenix-like eyes made his heart beat a little faster. Coldness and gentleness interweaved together like a beautiful painting. I like to watch Your Majesty eat. Rin Baqian forcefully suppressed his emotions and said, In my world there is a saying that beauty is a feast for the eyes. When facing Your Majesty, I feel that I am already full without eating. Why do I feel that you can't eat when you see me? The Empress said coldly. How is that possible? It is my greatest fortune to be able to eat with Your Majesty. I don't know how many people in the world are envious of me, Rin Baqian immediately replied with a, You have misunderstood, look on his face. The Empress looked at him and ignored him. She continued to eat. Her movements were slightly slower, but it was almost undetectable. After dinner, the Empress said again, Teach Goyu some other dishes. I am tired of eating the dishes from the Imperial Kitchen. Rin Baqian nodded his head in response. He was prepared to go back and copy the 8 major cuisines and send them to caretaker Go. After dinner, Rin Baqian accompanied the Empress for a while. Then he walked back under the moonlight. The palace was always very quiet. Occasionally he would come across patrolling guards. There weren't even many maids. During the day there was still some liveliness and vigor. Every time it was night time it would be quiet. After staying in such a place for a long time, it was no wonder that the Empress's temperament was so cold. After returning to his bed, Rin Baqian's mind was filled with thoughts of quickly giving his family a call. He did not know how anxious they were. When he woke up, Rin Baqian was slightly stunned by the familiar scenery around him. It was an antique room and he was still in Pingle Park. Why didn't I go back? Did I calculate the date wrongly? Rin Baqian thought suspiciously. According to his calculations, today was the 24th day. It was indeed time for him to go back. This was because every time he traveled he would stay in this world for 4 days. Previously he had greeted the Empress on his first day back and began to practice. Therefore there was no problem with the time calculation. In that case the guards must have remembered wrongly, right? A group of fellows who had to stretch out all 5 of their fingers to make a 2 sign were indeed unreliable. The aboriginals knew how to count, and a sow could climb a tree. Rinpoche lamented in his heart. In the future, if he had the opportunity, he would definitely start a mathematics education program so that they could learn addition and subtraction. After getting out of bed, Rinpoche washed his face and sat back on the bed. He visualized the visualization of water, from Rui visualization, in his mind. After a while he appeared on the shore again. Having experienced it once, Rinpoche was considered familiar with it. He immediately swam to the center of the lake and dove towards the bottom. Every time he dove he would feel greater resistance and pressure. After barely reaching the previous position, Rinpoche could no longer bear it and withdrew from his mind. He felt extremely tired. His body was fine, but his brain was signaling that he was extremely tired. After lying on the bed and taking a short nap, Rinpoche more or less recovered a little. Why didn't breakfast be delivered today? Rinpoche felt a little strange. If he was in Pingle Park, there would always be a maid delivering breakfast. Now he was hungry. Looking at the time, it was almost 10 o'clock, but breakfast was still not delivered. Logically speaking, such a thing should not have happened. There was someone in charge of this, and it was impossible for something like forgetting to happen. Could it be that something really happened? Rinpoche thought for a long time but still had no clue. He wondered if he should go to the imperial kitchen to get something to eat. There was an organization in the palace that specialized in preparing meals for the maids and guards. However, Rinpoche was not familiar with it. It should not be a problem for him to get something to eat in the imperial kitchen. At the thought of this, he got out of bed and went straight to the imperial kitchen. Everyone was researching new dishes. They were a little surprised to see Rinpoche, but they greeted him happily. After all, Rinpoche was always able to bring good things to the imperial kitchen, be it seasonings or dishes. Previously, everyone called him Brother Ren because of the rules of the bet. Regardless of whether they were willing or not, at least they had to be willing to lose the bet. Now that they saw Rinpoche again, they did not show any signs of reluctance. On one hand, Rinpoche really knew how to cook a lot of different dishes. Even though the dishes at the banquet that day weren't very good, they tasted pretty good. After learning those, it was much easier for them to research new dishes. After all, none of the people in the imperial kitchen were bad at cooking. It was just that their thinking had been limited. After seeing more things, it felt like a new door had been opened. These days the imperial kitchen could produce 2 dishes in a few days. Even though the taste was a little lacking, it was still much faster than producing 2 dishes in a month in the past. In addition, Rinpoche's status was different from the past. Chapter 139. After having a meal in the imperial kitchen and giving some pointers to the chefs, Rinpoche left the imperial kitchen. He recalled that the Empress asked him to finish his story. Since he had nothing to do now, he decided to meet the Empress. Recently he had become more familiar with the palace. At the very least he was more familiar with Pingle Park, Yangxin Palace Hall, Qingxin Palace Hall, and the imperial kitchen. In the palace, the Empress twirled her hair around her finger. After a while, her hair returned to its original state. She was stunned when she heard that Rinpoche wanted to meet her. According to the calendar, Rinpoche should be back today. Summon him in. The Empress sat up straight and ordered. After a while, Rinpoche entered the palace and greeted, "Greetings, Your Majesty. Why didn't you go back?" The Empress looked at him and asked. Rinpoche was stunned. "Your Majesty, what do you mean? You go missing for 1 day every 3 days. You told me before that you can't control it and don't know the reason. Why didn't you go back this time? Could it be that you have been lying to me all along?" As the Empress spoke till here, her eyebrows were already raised and her facial expression was already slightly angry. She had never asked him about it and trusted him. However, he didn't tell the truth. In that case, how much of what he said in the past was true and how much was false? The feeling of being lied to filled the Empress's heart. Anger rose in her heart. At the same time, it was mixed with a kind of disappointment and loss. After hearing what the Empress said, Rinpoche's face changed drastically. It was understandable that those guards couldn't remember the calendar, but would the Empress remember wrongly? No matter what, she wouldn't be like those guards who only knew how to stretch out 5 fingers, right? "You lied to me," the Empress said coldly. I really don't know why it is like this, but I have never lied to your majesty. Rinpoche was in a mess and quickly said loudly. At this moment, his heart was on fire. How could this be? How could this be? How could there be a problem? I want to go back, I have to go back. If I don't go back, what will my parents do? At this moment, Rinpoche's mind was filled with such thoughts. At the same time, the light around Rinpoche changed slightly. It was as if the light around him was refracted as if it was shining into water. The air around Rinpoche seemed to have changed as well. The enraged Empress also sensed that something was wrong with Rinpoche. She instantly appeared in front of him, grabbed his wrist and tried to pull him out. In the next second, Qing Yuan and Hong Luan, who were in the Yangxin Palace, let out a cry of surprise. When Xinjia rushed into the hall, she discovered that the Empress and storyteller Ren were nowhere to be seen. What happened? His Majesty has disappeared. Hong Luan's face was filled with shock. As soon as she said this, Xinjia instantly appeared in front of Hong Luan and held her tightly. She widened her eyes and asked, "Where's Her Majesty? Where did His Majesty go?" "I don't know either. Just now, Her Majesty grabbed storyteller Ren and both of them disappeared." Hong Luan's voice trembled. If the news of the Empress's disappearance were to spread, one could imagine the kind of perilous situation that would ensue. "Tell me the details," Xinjia said to Hong Luan. Following which, she quickly ordered the people behind her, "Search. Don't let go of even an inch of the entire palace. Search." At the same time, inform the Department of Inspection to search both inside and outside the city. But don't mention anything about Her Majesty. Just say that storyteller Ren has disappeared. Other than this, don't leak a single word to anyone. If the news is leaked, I will personally chop off his head. Rinpoche looked at his surroundings and looked at the Empress in front of him, who was dressed in red. He was dumbfounded and his mind was blank. The Empress's hand was very soft and didn't have any calluses. If there was a ranking of the most beautiful hands in the world, this hand would definitely be one of them. However, at this moment, Rinpoche couldn't feel anything. He was completely dumbfounded. At this moment, the surrounding environment was the house that he lived in on Earth. Yet, the Empress actually followed him here. Other than a series of curses, Rinpoche didn't have any other thoughts. His brain had long stopped working. "Is this your world?" The Empress was much more clear-headed than him. After turning her head to look at her surroundings, she frowned. It was too dirty and there was dust everywhere. Furthermore, the air was very bad, and a pungent smell directly rushed into her nose. "Your Majesty! Your Majesty!" Rinpoche opened his mouth and looked like he was about to cry. "Your Majesty, why did you follow me here?" After hearing Rinpoche's words, the Empress subconsciously loosened her grip on Rinpoche's hand. "Do you not want me to come?" the Empress asked coldly. "No, I am just surprised. Even though I have long wanted to let your Majesty see the world that I live in, I don't know if it is really possible." "I am really too surprised," Rinpoche hurriedly said. "This is where you live? Why isn't anyone tidying up this place?" The Empress said with a look of disgust. "Your Majesty, please go outside and let me tidy up this place." Rinpoche felt that he needed some time to sort out his emotions. He was really frightened now. The Empress who dismantled the Gundam with her bare hands and broke into a city single-handedly actually followed him to Earth. This made his mind a mess. Rinpoche turned around and opened the door. "Your Majesty, please follow me." The apartment that Rinpoche rented was 7 stories high. In addition to a bedroom, there was also a small living room and a large balcony. The Empress looked around curiously. Everything was full of a fresh feeling. She had never seen or heard of anything before. "What is this?" The Empress took a few steps forward and stretched out her hand to touch the glass door of the balcony. "Your Majesty, this is glass. You can see outside through the glass. It doesn't affect your vision, but it can block out dust and separate the temperature from the outside." "I want this." The Empress immediately decided. "Your Majesty, I will go back and finish the iron mine. I will make glass for you," Rinpoche hurriedly said. "What is outside?" The Empress looked outside the glass door and asked. "Your Majesty, that is snow." Rinpoche looked outside the door. The Empress definitely didn't ask about the balcony. There was a thick layer of snow on the balcony and snowflakes were still falling from the sky. "I want to go out and take a look." "Open this." Upon hearing this, Rinpoche hurriedly opened the door and a gust of extremely cold air directly blew in. At this moment, Great Xia was extremely hot. Rinpoche wore the official uniform of the storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall every day. When the cold air blew on his body, he felt slightly chilly, but it wasn't too cold. The Empress seemed to be completely unaware of the cold outside. As soon as she stepped onto the balcony, she stepped into the snow and scooped up a handful of snow with both hands. Chapter 140. The Empress was dressed in red as she stood in the snow. Her fine black hair was blown by the wind. The moment she touched the snowflakes with her fingers, Rinpoche felt his heart beating faster. If possible, he really wanted to take a picture of this scene with his phone. It was so beautiful that it made people lose their wits. "Your Majesty, it's a little cold outside," Rinpoche said softly. At the same time, he noticed that the Empress wasn't wearing shoes. At that time, she suddenly appeared in front of him on the bed and was brought back by him. The Empress turned her head and glanced at him. Her fine black hair was blown by the wind and a few strands were blocking her delicate and moving face. Rinpoche felt that there was a cold look in the Empress's eyes. In the next second, the Empress grabbed Rinpoche's throat and threw him against the wall. "You lied to me," the Empress said coldly. "I trust you, but you have been lying to me all along." The Empress stretched out her right hand and seemed to be waiting for Rinpoche's explanation. If he couldn't explain clearly, her whole body was emitting an imposing aura, and it looked like she was going to flip out. Cough, cough. Rinpoche felt a tightness in his chest and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He could feel that the imposing aura from the Empress was like a mountain range, making him unable to move at all. Bang! The window and glass door of the balcony at the side exploded and fell to the ground with a crash. "Your Majesty, I also don't know how this happened. Previously I couldn't control it at all. Otherwise, why would I disappear once every 3 days? Isn't this obviously telling others that there's something wrong with me? Why would I do such a thing? I just don't know if it's due to the influence of Rui visualization, or some other reason. Just now, I was thinking why I didn't come back on the day and suddenly came back," Rinpoche hurriedly explained. If the Empress in front of him flipped out, he would really be in trouble. Even if the Empress wouldn't kill him because he had to return to Dayo, she wouldn't let him have an easy time. The Empress lifted him up by his neck and pressed him against the wall. "I want to know how much of what you said to me was true?" Rinpoche's throat was tightly gripped by the Empress, and sweat kept flowing down his forehead. "If I could choose, I would always be under the same sky as your Majesty. A world without your Majesty is meaningless to me. A future without your Majesty is also not the future I want. Why would I deceive your Majesty? It's just that I don't know what unforeseen event happened that caused me to suddenly become like this." "I have no intention of deceiving you," Rinpoche said with difficulty. The Empress stared into his eyes, seemingly trying to determine whether he was lying or not. After a while, he slid to the ground, covered his throat and coughed violently. Just now, he felt like he was suffocating. Fortunately, fresh air filled his lungs and brought him back to life. Just now, when Rinpoche felt the oppressive aura from the Empress, the residents on the 2 floors below suddenly felt as if their bodies were being pressed down by something. They couldn't move at all and even had difficulty breathing. Some of them even wanted to take out their phones to call 120. However, after the Empress withdrew her aura, those people regained their composure. However, for the sake of safety, it was better to go to the hospital to check if there was any problem. "Don't lie to me. Otherwise, even if you are at the ends of the earth, even if you cross this world, I will still kill you." The Empress stepped on the ground with her bare feet, her hair gently fluttering as she looked at him and said. Rinpoche leaned against the wall and smiled bitterly. "Her Majesty is like a fairy in this world. Who would have the heart to lie to your Majesty? If there is such a person, he is either blind or a fool. I am neither blind nor a fool, so why would I lie to your Majesty?" Only then did the Empress's expression become more relaxed. She walked to the balcony and looked outside. The broken glass on the ground couldn't cause any damage to her pure white feet. The moment the soles of her feet touched the glass, they turned into powder and were blown into the house by the wind outside. Rinpoche sat on the floor to rest for a while before standing up. Even though the Empress was filled with anger just now, she still had a sense of propriety and didn't hurt him at all. "Your Majesty, it's cold here. Follow me downstairs," Rinpoche said from behind the Empress. "All right." The Empress nodded her head, followed Rinpoche downstairs and sat on the sofa. "I want this," the Empress said as she felt the softness of the sofa. "I have already prepared it for your Majesty. Previously, when I was in the Beast Park, I got someone to tan some animal skins to make a sofa for your Majesty to sit on. That kind of wooden couch is too hot if it is covered with animal skins. If it is not covered with animal skins, it will be too hard. It's just that during this period of time, I have been focusing on Rui visualization. As a result, this matter was delayed. When I return, I can get someone to make it, Rinpoche explained as he stood at the side. Take a seat as well. The Empress's expression became gentler when she heard that he had already prepared it. Rinpoche could finally heave a sigh of relief and sat on the other side. What's that? The Empress pointed to the chandelier above her head and asked. Your Majesty, that's our chandelier, but it doesn't need oil, Rinpoche said as he stood up and switched on the switch. As Rinpoche spoke, he got up and turned on the switch. The chandelier immediately lit up, and the artificial crystal under the chandelier refracted the light. This item is not bad, it actually doesn't need oil, I want this. The Empress looked at the chandelier and revealed an excited expression. After hearing the Empress's words, Rinpoche quickly thought about how to generate electricity in Dayo. At the very least, he had to ensure the supply of electricity to Yangxing Palace Hall. There were many small diesel generators on the streets, but where was he going to get diesel? He couldn't possibly bring back a pile of diesel every time he came back, right? He couldn't possibly bring back a lot of diesel either. Perhaps he should see if there was a hand-operated or foot-operated generator. He had to think of a way to store electricity. What's that? The Empress asked again. Rinpoche looked in the direction that the Empress was looking at and hurriedly said, This is a clock, it's used to measure time. We use seconds as the unit of measurement here. The thinnest needle moves for 1 second, 60 seconds for 1 minute, which is the longest minute hand. 60 minutes is 1 hour, and there are 24 hours in a day. Rinpoche looked at the clock and explained to the Empress. The time now was 10:17 in the morning. 1 hour in that world was equivalent to 3 hours on Earth. When Rinpoche met the Empress, it was approximately 11 o'clock in the morning. Converted to 33 hours, it was equivalent to 9 hours in a day on Earth. He had been delayed for a while just now, and it was already past 10 o'clock in the morning. This is somewhat useful, I want it. There were no surprises. The Empress was very interested in everything on Earth. Rinpoche belonged to her, and his things naturally belonged to her as well. I wonder if your Majesty is hungry? Shall I prepare some food for your Majesty? Rinpoche reckoned that in a while, the Empress would classify this house as Dayo's territory on Earth. All right. The Empress nodded her head and continued to look around. Rinpoche saw that she was still at the stage where she was interested in everything after coming to the New World. He left her there and went to the fridge to search for something. Following which, he turned around and said, Your Majesty, there's only instant noodles left. Chapter 141. Rinpoche turned on the induction cooker to boil water. When he turned around, he suddenly saw the Empress behind him. That thing can produce water. How do you do that? This thing doesn't have fire? The Empress was like a question baby. Everything she saw was new. Everything here was different from what she knew in the past. It was full of grotesque and variegated things. Rinpoche had no choice but to explain the tap water, induction cooker, and electricity to the Empress. Although there were still some parts that she didn't understand, she had a rough understanding of them. Fortunately, the Empress didn't ask for this time. After all, regardless of whether it was carrying water or cooking, she didn't have much of a concept. Rinpoche was making instant noodles while the Empress watched him from behind. Not long after, the aroma of instant noodles wafted out. Rinpoche placed the instant noodles on the table. At the same time, he indicated to the Empress, Your Majesty, this thing is to be eaten with a fork. Of course, chopsticks are fine as well. However, you have to be careful, it's very hot. There was no such food as noodles in Dayo. At least, Rinpoche had never seen it before. He had no choice but to explain in detail to the Empress. It had to be said that even when the Empress was eating instant noodles, it gave people the feeling that she was eating a Manchuhan imperial feast. Every move of hers was so exquisite. Why aren't you eating? The Empress raised her head and asked after eating a few mouthfuls. I just ate something before going to Yangxing Palace Hall. I'm not hungry now. Your Majesty, please wait for a while. I'll go up and tidy up, Rinpoche said to the Empress. At the same time, he placed a napkin beside her. Go ahead. The Empress ignored him. Rinpoche went upstairs and looked at the completely broken glass and door. He pondered if he should use something to seal it up first and find time to get someone to replace the glass. Back in his room, Rinpoche immediately took out his phone. It had been plugged in for more than 20 days and it still had battery. When he turned on the screen, he saw that there were more than 100 missed calls. There were from his parents, his younger brother, Renwanyin, Chin, and many other unknown numbers. Rinpoche hurriedly called his mother back. After one ring, the call was connected. Bachin? Mom, it's me, Rinpoche said softly. Where have you been? Why haven't I heard from you after such a long time? If it wasn't for your friends saying that you might have gone into the mountains to meet someone, we would have reported you to the police. Where are you now? Hurry up and come back. Rinpoche's mother bombarded him with questions and started crying in the end. Rinpoche felt guilty and said, I did have something to do a few days ago. I was in the mountains and didn't bring my phone with me. Initially, I thought I would be back in 8 to 10 days, but I didn't expect to encounter something that delayed me. How are you now? Where is it? Do you know how worried we were when he disappeared for such a long time? This time it was Rinpoche's father's turn. It seemed like the whole family had been worried to death because of him. I'm at the rented apartment and have just returned, Rinpoche replied. Come back in 2 days? I'm afraid it'll take some time. Previously it was because of the company's matters. Now that I'm back, I have to settle the company's matters first. You two don't have to worry. I'm fine. It's just that I've been running around a lot lately and can't settle down. However, since it's a business, there's nothing you can do about it, right? Rinpoche pretended to be relaxed. Turn on the video call. I want to see where you are and if you're alright. Rinpoche's father hung up the phone after he finished speaking. Following which, a video call was sent over. Rinpoche had no choice but to accept the video call. Immediately, 2 faces appeared on the screen. His father's eyes were bloodshot while his mother's eyes were slightly red and swollen from crying. I told you I'm really fine. I just came back from outside. Look inside. Rinpoche pointed the camera at the surroundings. There was dust everywhere. See, there's such a thick layer of dust. I just came back and haven't cleaned it yet. Following which, he went to the window and took a picture of the neighborhood outside before turning the camera back to face himself. See, I'm back. However, I reckon I'll still be busy for some time. It's good that you're fine, it's good that you're fine. No matter what, we're relieved to see you. The 2 elders heaved a sigh of relief. Next time you must call us often. It's best if you call us once a week, but not more than a month. Otherwise we'll call the police. Got it? However, which friend of mine said that I went into the mountains? Is it Chin? Rinpoche pondered for a while and asked. He was the only one who could say that, but how did the 2 elders find him? The 2 elders shouldn't know about his circle of friends. He's called Chin. He's a fair and handsome lad. His upbringing is pretty good as well. Speaking up to this point, the 2 elders were stunned for a moment. Following which, their eyes lit up. Who's the lady behind you? Rinpoche was astonished when he saw the 2 elders' expressions. Upon hearing this, he almost vomited a mouthful of blood. I still have something to say, I'll talk to you later. Rinpoche hung up the phone and turned his head. The Empress was right behind him. Her face was almost touching the back of his neck. An extremely alluring floral fragrance wafted directly into Rinpoche's nose. Rinpoche instantly froze and didn't dare to move an inch. At this moment, his face was less than 5 centimeters away from the Empress. He could even feel her breathing. Why is there someone inside? The Empress stretched out 2 fingers and took the phone away from Rinpoche's hand. She inadvertently turned around and took a few steps forward. What's this thing? Your Majesty, this is a mobile phone. It's used for long-distance communication. Previously, I told Your Majesty that there's a huge network here that covers the entire world. It allows people to instantly know what's happening on the other side of the world. A mobile phone is such a product. No matter where or when, it can be used for long-distance communication. Can it be used in Dayo? The Empress was obviously very interested in this thing. It could directly know news from afar and speak to people who were very far away. No matter what happened anywhere, the imperial court could immediately know about it. The value of this thing was very high. Your Majesty, if you want to use the wireless network, you must have a considerable technological foundation. This is because a mobile phone needs a base station to transmit information to a faraway place. I'm afraid that Dayo can't build a base station and a mobile phone in a short period of time. If there are copper and iron mines in Dayo, perhaps I can make a wired phone in my lifetime. However, that will take a long time. Currently, the level of technology in Dayo is really too low, Rinpoche said. I don't quite understand. Are you saying that it can't be used in Dayo? The Empress asked. There wasn't any displeasure on her face. It was more like she was trying to find out more. It's just like transmitting a beacon. There must always be a person standing at one place. After seeing the beacon from afar, he ignites the beacon to transmit the information to the next place. This is the function of a base station. However, the information transmitted is even more complicated. From the steam engine to electricity to the network, It took hundreds of years of development to reach the current stage. Even though I know the technology involved, Dayo lacks the foundation of this technology. It's just like an infant in swaddling clothes. If you give him a knife, he won't know how to use it. Only when he grows up can he learn how to use it. Chapter 142. Rinpoche spent a lot of effort to let the Empress roughly understand the meaning of technology. However, it was impossible for her to fully understand it. No matter how smart the Empress was, she couldn't understand a huge conceptual system that she had never heard of before and even challenged her understanding of the world in a short period of time. Even though she was an earthling, she only had a rough idea of many things and some of her knowledge was completely wrong. However, Rinpoche spent a lot of effort to let the Empress understand that this world was different from the one Dayo was in. Your Majesty, I will send you back first and inform them that you have been missing for half a day. I reckon that the palace is worried sick, Rinpoche said to the Empress. If you want to come back, you can come back later. Now that the Empress was here, Rinpoche simply let it go. If the Empress wanted to come, then so be it. It was fine as long as she didn't cause any trouble. However, it would be better if he could control the return time. First, he could control the time freely. Second, he could use it to escape. If his life was in danger, he could return immediately. Who could chase after him? When he returned a few days later, he didn't believe that they would squat in the grass and jump out shouting, Demacia. The Empress nodded after hearing Rinpoche's words and said, although no one can hurt me, my sudden disappearance will indeed cause chaos. I will go back and inform them first. Rinpoche understood that the Empress was going to inform them before returning to continue touring Earth. Your Majesty, grab me, Rinpoche said to the Empress and felt a soft hand grabbing his wrist. Return to that world, return to that world, return to that world. Rinpoche called out in his heart for a long time, but his surroundings were calm. There was no change in his location at all. Return to Dayo, return to the palace, return to where I came from. Rinpoche continued to think in his heart. However, there was still no change in his surroundings. The two of them didn't move at all. This gave him a bad premonition. He looked up and saw that the Empress was looking at him with her clear eyes. Return, return to that world, return to Dayo, return to the palace, return to where I came from. Rinpoche simply closed his eyes and recited. When he opened his eyes again, he was still in the same place. The Empress was still looking at him, and that hand was still grabbing his wrist. Your Majesty, it seems like we can't go back for the time being. I reckon that the battery isn't fully charged. Rinpoche said awkwardly. That was the only explanation for the current situation. He hoped that he wouldn't be unable to return. If that was the case, there would be a huge mess. Based on the previous transmigration situation, it would probably take 3 days to return. However, it was best for him to try it every once in a while. The earlier he could send this person back, the earlier he could be at ease. He wondered how chaotic the palace was right now. Fine, I shall wait for a while and take this opportunity to see what they are thinking, the Empress said as she released her grip. She didn't seem to care. Rinpoche had no choice but to bring the Empress along to learn about the various things in this world. This is the toilet bowl. It's used to relieve yourself. Put down the cushion and sit on it. Then press this button to flush. This is a faucet. This is the switch to turn on and off the light. This is a refrigerator. It's specially used to store food. Does your Majesty want ice cream? Rinpoche took out a stick of pure milk ice cream. Your Majesty, you can try it. It's iced but it tastes good. It's specially used to relieve the summer heat. The Empress bit on the ice cream while following Rinpoche around the entire house. Your Majesty, you can watch the television. This is also part of the internet that I mentioned just now. You can see images from afar. Rinpoche switched on the television. A crocodile with a mouth full of fangs pounced on him. Rinpoche's heart skipped a beat. He was afraid that the Empress would get agitated and slap the crocodile. Not to mention the television, even the walls would be destroyed. After all, the Empress had never seen a television before. All kinds of actions were possible. However, the Empress didn't move at all. She sat on the sofa and bit on the ice cream while watching the crocodile on the television. She said, I keep feeling as if I'm in that box. Someone used a special device to record this image and then played it on the television, Rinpoche explained. This thing can be found in Dayo. The big one is about 3 to 4 feet long. It's much bigger than the small thing in this box. It's not considered strong, but it's always hiding in the water and not easy to hunt. Rinpoche calculated in his heart. 3 to 4 feet long was about 10 to 13 meters. It was much bigger than the one on Earth. However, to those ferocious people who demolished the city walls with their bare hands, even if the crocodile was stronger than the one on Earth, it wouldn't have much lethality. No wonder the Empress didn't react at all. Ren Baqin switched to a few channels. Other than advertisements, there were only television dramas or reruns of variety shows. He was afraid that the Empress wouldn't be interested in these things. If possible, he would like to let the Empress watch the news broadcast. At least, she would have a better understanding of this world. Ren Baqin simply searched for movies on the internet and found the war movie Pearl Harbor for the Empress. In his impression, this movie wasn't small. At least, it let her know that the technology on Earth wasn't just for daily conveniences, but also for war. This way it would be less troublesome in the future. After all, if such a conceited master were to stay here for a few days, Ren Baqin was afraid that the Empress would want to go out and take a look. If that were to happen, it wouldn't be easy to clean up the mess. Therefore, this movie was to let the Empress experience the power of Earth's technology. At the same time, she would be more restrained. When the time comes, he would give her a good reminder. Your Majesty, this is a very old war scene. I feel that Your Majesty can take a look at it. The power of the weapons nowadays is much greater than what is shown in this scene, Ren Baqin said as he switched to the scene of the Japanese attack. Are they humans too? The Empress looked at the characters on the screen and was immediately astonished. They are white people and black people. Ren Baqin roughly explained the three main races to her. Very quickly, the scene of the Japanese plane flying in the sky attracted the Empress's attention. This thing can fly in the sky? It's similar to those scrap metal, but those scrap metal can't carry people into the sky, the Empress evaluated. Ren Baqin pondered. Could the scrap metal that the Empress was talking about be a spirit sword? Ren Baqin smiled bitterly and said, Your Majesty, please wait for a moment. I'll go upstairs and tidy up. He went upstairs and looked at the big holes on the door and window. Ren Baqin found two bedding and hung it on them to block the wind. Next, he began to sweep and mop the floor, preparing to tidy up the room. At this moment, the sound of various gunshots and explosions could be heard from the television downstairs. The Empress's eyes were full of interest as she watched the scene on the television. At this moment in Ren Baqin's hometown, his parents were sitting on the sofa and staring at each other. Ren Baqin's mother asked, Did you see that lady just now? Which celebrity is she? Ren Baqin's father rubbed his chin and said, Your son has a girlfriend. If that's the case, you don't have to worry about her anymore. How can that be? That lady is too beautiful and not suitable to be my daughter-in-law. Even though I only saw her just now, she had a cold look on her face. Her character is definitely not good. Let our son make his own decision. He is now an adult and has his own views. Ren Baqin's father shook his head. As a parent, I have to keep an eye on him, right? Last time, he lied to me and said that he would make arrangements for her. In the end, that lady waited for a week and didn't receive a call from him. Now, when her aunt sees me, she doesn't like me at all, Ren Baqin's mother complained. Chapter 143. As Ren Baqin was tidying up his room, his phone rang. He picked it up and saw that it was his father. Please don't create any more trouble. Ren Baqin was reluctant, but he still answered the call. I hope I'm not disturbing you? Papa Ren asked with a smile. What's the matter? Say it, Ren Baqin said weakly. Bring your girlfriend home for a meal. Your mother and I want to see her. You are thinking too much. She's my business partner, not my girlfriend, Ren Baqin denied flatly. If that's the case, I'm afraid your mother will have to make arrangements for you again. Do as you see fit. Ren Baqin was furious. He was afraid that he wouldn't die fast enough. If my mother makes arrangements again, I will bring a boyfriend home. After finishing his sentence, he hung up the phone and switched it off. What did he say? Mama Ren asked from the sofa. He said he wants to find a boyfriend. Papa Ren's face turned green. Ren Baqin tidied up the house in a mess. When he went downstairs, he saw the Empress eating the ice cream. There were already 3 ice cream packages on the coffee table. Your Majesty, this is too cold. It will hurt your stomach if you eat too much of it, Ren Baqin couldn't help but say. The first thing the Empress learned to do after coming to Earth was to open the fridge to take ice cream. I want the ice cream from the one just now. The Empress finished the last bit of ice cream and put the ice cream stick on the coffee table. Then she pointed to the television and said, The one on the television was Pearl Harbor. Other than airplanes, there were only warships. Your Majesty, I will do my best, but this will take time. After all, modern technology is a very sophisticated system. The object that you saw is made up of countless small parts. We have to lay a good foundation, and only when Dayo's technology reaches a certain level can we achieve this. Just like practicing martial arts, we can't immediately reach the earth wheel level without even getting started, Rinpoche said helplessly. The Empress nodded her head in agreement. What kind of weapon can destroy a city from 1,000 miles away? The Empress asked curiously. The Empress had seen those things on the television just now. Unless it was an expert like her, ordinary aboriginals would find it hard to defend against it. The main reason was that it was too densely packed and many experts couldn't avoid it. This gave her some respect for Earth's technology. Although it could be seen from the television that the people here were all very weak, the destructive power of those machines was very strong. Rinpoche searched for the video of the atomic bomb explosion and played it. The screen was black and white. At the beginning, it was a group of people talking about something. At the same time, there was an epic background music playing. It was easy to get people excited. At this moment, the Empress looked very relaxed and commented, "This music is not bad, I like it very much. If your Majesty likes it, I can prepare some for you. You can listen to it to pass the time," Rinpoche immediately said. While Rinpoche was speaking, a scene immediately appeared in his mind. In the future, when the Empress was dueling with someone, he would play the divine sword drawing song with a stereo system. That scene was simply too beautiful. The scene on the TV continued. With a boom sound, a huge cloud of dust rose into the sky from the ground in the distance, forming a huge mushroom cloud. After that, he swooped down from the sky again. In the distance, flames and smoke formed a mushroom cloud that soared into the sky, and the entire ground shook. Upon seeing this, the Empress's expression turned serious, and her body straightened up. Even an expert like her wouldn't be able to achieve such power. In particular, the range was extremely large. If she was close, she wouldn't be able to dodge it at all. This kind of power already existed in legends. The explosion range of such a weapon can probably envelop the entire Lan city. On Earth, there are more than 40,000 warheads of such a weapon, enough to destroy a world. Rinpoche looked at the Empress's expression and added in a timely manner. However, you said that the use of such weapons has already been banned. After hearing Rinpoche's words, the Empress relaxed and slowly leaned back on the sofa. Even though her expression was still very grave, her eyes were emitting light. "I want this." The Empress looked at Rinpoche with glowing eyes and said earnestly. At this moment, her expression was like that of a little girl who saw her beloved toy. Great Xia is making preparations and will definitely make a move within 2 years. If we have this kind of weapon, we can eliminate the Great Xia army in one fell swoop and march straight into the capital of Great Xia. Rinpoche almost vomited blood again. "Your Majesty, this thing is only in the hands of each nation. I can't buy it." Rinpoche's face turned black. "I can exchange for it. As long as Dayo has it, I can exchange for martial arts, secret manuals and other things," the Empress insisted. "Your Majesty, it's better not to consider this kind of weapon for the time being. Even if we can really obtain it, I may not be able to bring it over. If it's other weapons, there might still be some hope. Dayo can even think of ways to manufacture some, such as grenades and mines. However, it's not easy. We need iron ores, smelting, precision processing and gunpowder. I feel that iron ores and standardized weapons are the more pressing issues at hand," Rinpoche said to the Empress. At the same time, he was pondering over what the Empress said about Great Xia definitely making a move within 2 years. In addition, the Empress previously asked him about iron ores and forging weapons. It seemed like the army didn't have enough equipment. However, after thinking about it, it was very normal. Dayo's industrial foundation was very poor. They completely relied on their strong individual strength to deter other nations. If there was going to be a war between the two nations, Great Xia was, after all, the strongest nation. Therefore, the Empress had no choice but to make more preparations. The Empress was slightly disappointed. However, she knew that what Rinpoche said was right. She was a little too anxious. "How many things can you bring back?" the Empress asked. "I haven't tried before. I reckon that I can only bring back things that I can carry. After we go back, we will first make iron ores and forge weapons." After hearing what Rinpoche said, the Empress finally gave up. After all, she was very clear about how weak Rinpoche was. There weren't many things that he could carry. "If it's Dayo's standard long sabers, as they are relatively heavy, I reckon that I can only carry about 10 of them. It's just a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood." However, it was still necessary. She had to go through various channels to obtain the military equipment for 20,000 soldiers. Furthermore, it was hard to say how much she would get in the end. "I want standard long sabers. Every time you go back, try to bring some back, the Empress said. Ren Baqin nodded. Your Majesty, I don't have enough funds here. I'm afraid I will need your help. Sure, I can allocate a portion of the imperial treasury for you to exchange for money. The Empress nodded. After hearing these words, Ren Baqin felt relieved. The Empress probably had a lot of good stuff, right? Furthermore, some things might not have much value in Dayo, but they were still very valuable on Earth. However, which was better, a standard long saber or a rifle? Ren Baqin felt that the latter was better. Although the people of Dayo were strong, casualties were inevitable in close combat. Using a rifle could completely change the way of warfare. Thinking about the soldiers of Dayo, if they were to carry a rifle, carry a full load of ammunition, and transform into Rambo, in Ren Baqin's opinion, it would be best to smelt and manufacture standard weapons in Dayo. It would be better to carry weapons and ammunition when he traveled back and forth. Of course, this was just an idea. After all, the consumption of ammunition was really too fast. Just the amount of ammunition needed for practice was not something that he could afford. However, thinking about it again, Great Xia's army was lined up and charged forward in a dense battle formation. It seemed that as long as they knew how to fire a gun and load it, it would suffice. In this case, if he only carried ammunition each time, he could carry 2 boxes of ammunition, which was 60 kilograms and 3,000 rounds. In 2 years, he could travel 180 times and carry more than 500,000 rounds of ammunition. Thinking about this, Ren Baqin was shocked. Wouldn't it be too dangerous to have so many firearms wander to the other world? Furthermore, he was afraid that he would be targeted by others if he carried so much ammunition. The Empress saw that Ren Baqin was deep in thought and didn't interrupt him. She quietly looked at his side profile. To her, this was the first time since the creation of the world that she quietly waited for someone to think. Chapter 144. I want to go out and take a look. When Ren Baqin heard this, he was immediately awakened from his thoughts. His face was stiff like a robot as he turned to look at the Empress. This man was indeed not someone who could live in a house. Ren Baqin roared in his heart. Follow me out. The Empress looked at Ren Baqin seriously and said, Your Majesty. I can go out, but I'm afraid I can't address you as Your Majesty outside. We don't have an emperor here. Even if there is one, it's not you. Ren Baqin looked bitter. I understand this. But you don't have an emperor? Who governs the country? The Empress was flabbergasted. We are a democracy here and the country's leader is elected. Ren Baqin roughly explained. Even though he didn't understand politics, he still knew the basics. I understand. Follow me out and take a look. The Empress roughly understood and thought that if someone asked her to go down, she would slap him to death. The people in this world were too weak. Your Majesty, I'm afraid your clothes won't do, Ren Baqin said. I still need to prepare some clothes for you. Go quickly. The Empress waved her hand. Ren Baqin helplessly turned on his phone and saw a bunch of missed calls. They were all from his parents. You are my little apple. The phone rang again and the caller ID was still, Dad. Ren Baqin picked up the phone and prepared to go to the second floor to answer the call. If he didn't answer the call, his parents would probably rush over overnight. However, he saw the Empress looking at him with a burning gaze. Is someone communicating with you from a distance? Is there anything you are afraid of me knowing? Ren Baqin didn't expect the Empress to remember it so clearly and react so quickly. She had never used it before, but she immediately knew that he was going to answer the call. It's from my parents. Ren Baqin looked bitter. You're not allowed to leave, sit down. The Empress looked at him. Dad, Mom, please don't say anything overboard. Ren Baqin prayed in his heart while looking at the Empress. He didn't know why the Empress suddenly became so interested and stared at him. You are my little apple. This damn ringtone made Ren Baqin very upset. He clenched his teeth and had no choice but to answer the call. Immediately, a voice came from the other end of the line. You have grown guts. You actually hung up and turned off your phone? Son, don't tell me you really like men. I'm telling you, if you bring a man back, we'll immediately break off our mother-son relationship. Ren Baqin's parents were shouting from the other end of the electric sparks. Ren Baqin's face turned ashen as he hung up the call. He almost smashed the phone. Beside him, the Empress's face froze. Are you gay? Ren Baqin spat out a mouthful of blood. It's a misunderstanding. Your Majesty, this is definitely a misunderstanding. The Empress's hair began to dance wildly behind her, and the temperature in the room plummeted. Your Majesty, please listen to me. I was forced to do this. At my age, I should have gotten married and had children long ago, but I can see your majesty every day. My heart is already filled with your majesty's figure, and there is no space left. How can I marry and have children with other people? I would rather stay by your majesty's side and watch your majesty's figure every day. This is my greatest wish. It's just that this official's parents don't know. Seeing that this official is unwilling to get married and have children after so long, this official has a headache. Rinpoche's words finally pacified the Empress, who was about to go berserk. You are the queen that I have chosen. You can tell this to your parents. Your Majesty, my parents are just ordinary people and don't have much experience. They won't believe this even if they break their heads. I can tell them personally. The Empress had an expression that said, "This is your greatest honor. Your Majesty, you better hide your identity. This identity can't be exposed. Even if it's exposed, what can they do to me? Even though the weapons in your world are very advanced, the most powerful weapons can't possibly be deployed in crowded places. No imperial court would do that," the Empress said calmly. In a short period of time, she had already figured out what was going on. No matter how powerful the weapons in this world were, could they make an entire city of people perish together with themselves? Rinpoche saw that even an atomic bomb couldn't scare her, so he had no choice but to act pitifully. Your Majesty, you aren't afraid, but I can't. If something happens to me, I won't be able to accompany you anymore. After all, I still have to come back often. Furthermore, Your Majesty, you have always been in the palace. Don't you want to experience life in this world like an ordinary person? The Empress thought about it. She was still very curious about this world. Furthermore, walking in the city like an ordinary person was a little attractive to her. In addition, the person in front of her was indeed very weak. If something happened to him, she wouldn't be able to return to Dayo. She wouldn't have the things that she liked. Forget it, I will do as you said and live the life of an ordinary person. The Empress finally agreed. Why don't I go out and buy some clothes for you first? Your Majesty, can you wait for me here? Rinpoche asked tentatively. I don't allow that. The Empress immediately rejected him. In this unfamiliar world, the Empress knew nothing except for Rinpoche. How could she let him out of her sight? If something happened to him, how was she going to return to Dayo? Rinpoche scratched his head. He also felt that it wasn't appropriate to leave her here, but he couldn't bring her along to buy clothes. He opened his phone and scrolled through his contact list. In the end, there was only one person he could choose. Seeing that the Empress didn't care about him, Rinpoche took his phone and walked to the kitchen to make a call. You are back. Jiangnan's gentle voice came from the other end of the phone. Rinpoche suddenly felt that this was what a girl should be like. The Empress was really too dignified, cold, and easily flipped out. Yes, can you help me buy some women's clothes and shoes and send them over? I need them urgently, Rinpoche whispered. Hello? Hello. Are they torn? Be careful next time. I happen to have time so I can help you. But when did you get a girlfriend? Jiangnan asked with a smile. It's not what you think. She's about 1.7 meters tall and weighs about 50 kilograms. It's best to wear a conservative red dress. Add a jacket and shoes. Give me a pair of size 36, 37, 38 and 39. I want flat shoes. Rinpoche understood the Chinese way of thinking too well. As long as there was something, they would think in that direction. He couldn't be bothered to explain further. Do you want underwear? Rinpoche clenched his teeth and said, yes, it's probably C by a few more sizes. Do you have any other requests? There's nothing else. Just do as you see fit from top to bottom as long as they match well. Also, don't tell Qin, Rinpoche exhorted. It's too late, he's just beside me, Jiangnan said with a smile. Qin immediately shouted from the other end of the phone, you're still hiding and don't dare to show your face. Alright, just send them to my door. Let's not see each other today, I'll look for you for a meal in the future, Rinpoche whispered. Jiangnan smiled and hung up the phone. I heard a woman's voice, the Empress said unhurriedly as she sat on the sofa. I can't leave so I can only ask someone else to buy it, Rinpoche said to the Empress. Oh. The Empress snorted softly and didn't mind. In fact, she heard Rinpoche's voice clearly, but she still said something inexplicably. Your Majesty, I have something to discuss with you. The Empress turned and looked at him. Your Majesty, you can't address yourself as I in this world. I'm afraid I have to address you by your name, or you can choose another name, Rinpoche said. I allow you to call me by my name in this world, the Empress said. After we go out, if Your Majesty, what do you like, you can tell me. You have to pay to buy things. Ren Bachien opened his mouth but didn't say anything. You have to pay even in Dayo. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? The Empress said unhappily. I'm specially following behind your majesty to help you pay your bills. Ren Bachien immediately changed his tune. The Empress then nodded her head and revealed a smile on her face. She agreed with Ren Bachien's words. No matter what happens outside, you must not be impulsive. Leave it to me. If someone offends you, it's because they don't know your identity. I hope your majesty won't be angry. Fighting on the streets is strictly prohibited in this world, and killing is even more prohibited. If anything happens, the police will immediately come to investigate, which is equivalent to Dayo's Public Order Bureau. If something happens, your majesty's identity will be easily exposed. The Empress continued to nod her head. I can set 3 rules with you. Chapter 145. Zixiao. Ren Bachien was perspiring profusely as he looked at the Empress. I allow it. The Empress nodded her head. Your Majesty, you have to call me that in this world, Ren Bachien corrected her. Well, I allow you to call me by my name, the Empress corrected him. Zixiao, where do you want to see? Ren Bachien asked. You said that the commoners here live and work in peace and contentment. Let's go and take a look. I want to see how the commoners in your world live, the Empress said after thinking for a while. Then let's go to the supermarkets and shopping malls. Those are the most crowded places. However, due to the large number of people, they might accidentally touch you. Don't get angry, Ren Bachien warned her again. I got it. Since I have made an agreement with you, I will not go back on my word, the Empress said impatiently. Your Majesty, you might not know how to wear the clothes in this world. I have to inform you about this, Ren Bachien said as he searched for bra on his phone. Then he showed the photo of the phone to the Empress. The Empress saw a photo of a woman wearing a bra on the screen. The phone instantly appeared in her hand and 3 of her fingers exerted force. Boom, the phone exploded. Even the battery exploded. There was no injury on the Empress's hand. What do you want to say? The Empress asked unhappily. Ren Bachien opened his mouth and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I'm afraid that your Majesty won't be able to wear the clothes in this world. You can tell me how to wear it when the time comes, the Empress said coldly and turned her head to look out of the window. But I was going to tell you how to wear it just now. Ren Bachien thought helplessly, but he couldn't say anything. It was a pity that his phone had died a tragic death. Could it be that he had to wear a bra to demonstrate to the Empress later? It seemed like this was the only way. Even though he only knew how to remove the bra, he didn't know how to wear it. After waiting for a long time, the sky was about to turn dark. Ren Bachien then heard someone knocking on the door. There's someone outside. The Empress turned her head and looked over. The clothes are here. I will go out to get them after they leave, Ren Bachien said. He didn't want to see Qingqing and Jiangnan now, especially not to let the Empress see them. Even though the Empress had promised him that she wouldn't get angry easily, he felt that it was better not to complicate matters. After about 10 minutes, Ren Bachien stood up and looked through the peephole. There was no one there. After pushing open the door, he saw 7 to 8 bags and boxes on the ground. Ren Bachien carefully carried all of them to the entrance of the house. Fortunately, the 2 of them didn't turn around and hide somewhere. It had to be said that it was a very heartwarming thing to have such an understanding friend. Ren Bachien closed the door, piled the boxes on the coffee table, and took out the shoes one by one. The shoes were exactly the same. They were black and had a buckle that was a combination of half a square and half a 5-pointed star. The buckle was decorated with broken diamonds and looked very beautiful. Let's try the size. Ren Bachien passed the size 37 to the Empress. The Empress was rather pleased with the expression on her face. It was rare to see such an expression on Ren Bachien's face. She looked somewhat like a young girl. This is fine, the Empress said after putting it on. Ren Bachien memorized the size 37. He then opened the other bags. Inside was a long red dress. The upper part of the dress was made of gauze and the rest of the dress was made of an opaque material. The dress was full of exquisite embroidery. It's fine. The Empress nodded her head. Your Majesty, this dress is put on from the top to the bottom. Ren Bachien roughly gestured and the Empress nodded her head. There was a long coat in the other bag. Ren Bachien casually put it aside. It was not too late to try it on later. The last paper bag was poured on the table. There were 2 lace panties that were translucent at the front and back. One was black and the other was red. There were a few bras, black and red, and they were also lace. Your Majesty. Ren Baqian's throat was a little dry. Even though these undergarments weren't very revealing, it was enough to make his heart tremble if the person in front of him wore them. What's this? The Empress curiously took one of them. This is the underwear of our world, Ren Baqian said awkwardly. Then he gritted his teeth, took out a bra and put it on himself. This is how you wear it, then buckle it at the back. This is an inner bra, it's like this. Before Ren Baqian could finish his demonstration, his whole body flew into the air, scaring him half to death. Fortunately, he only fell lightly on the ground. When he came back to his senses, he saw a red dress disappearing around the corner. Soon after, the door closed with a bang. Phew. Ren Baqian sat on the ground and let out a long breath. Teaching the Empress how to wear undergarments still made him a little embarrassed. He got up and sat on the sofa. Ren Baqian waited for the Empress to change her clothes. He was also thinking about how the Empress would look after changing into modern clothes. After waiting for a long time, just when Ren Baqian was wondering why the Empress hadn't come out yet, he heard a voice coming from the room that the Empress had just entered. Ren Baqian. Your Majesty? Ren Baqian stood in front of the door and asked carefully. In your heart, what do you think of me? I want to hear the truth. The Empress's voice came from the room. It was a little deep. Like a fairy in the world, you are the only existence in this world, the world where Dayo is located. The radiance from your body is like the sun that attracts everyone. When they get close to you, they will feel the scorching heat and burns, but they are willing to do so, Ren Baqian said in a low voice. Ren Baqian lowered his voice and said. Even he himself felt that his attainments in bootlicking had reached perfection. Come in. I can't fasten it anymore. Following Ren Baqian's words, the Empress's voice came from the room. Her voice was slightly trembling and it seemed to be a little shy. In an instant, Ren Baqian's heart trembled incessantly along with this voice. It was as if a ball of fire was burning in his heart. Your Majesty, I'm going in. Ren Baqian hesitated for a while, gently turned the door handle and said. Inside the room, the Empress's back was facing Ren Baqian. She was only wearing a pair of black translucent panties. One of her arms was covered in front of her chest. 2 black straps were hanging down, and her hair was hanging in front of her shoulders. Her fair and smooth back, slender legs, and hooked buttocks were all exposed in front of Ren Baqian. Ren Baqian's throat was dry. His heartbeat soared from 67 beats per minute to 120 beats per minute. It was like a beating drum, and it seemed as if it would jump out of his chest at any time. The back view in front of him, as well as the identity and strength of the owner of this back view, simply made him want to explode. I can't fasten it anymore. Fasten it for me, the Empress said coldly. However, the trembling in her voice couldn't be concealed. Yes, Your Majesty. Ren Baqian closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Even though his heart was still beating very fast, it was at least slightly better than before. Ren Baqian took a few steps forward, stretched out his hands and grabbed the 2 straps that were hanging down. He took a whiff of the Empress's fragrance and fastened the straps together with his trembling hands. When his fingers came into contact with the smooth skin of the Empress's back, the Empress trembled slightly. Ren Baqian's forehead was beaded with sweat as he fastened the straps. It took him a long time to fasten it properly. During this period of time, his fingers brushed across the Empress's back more than once, giving her goosebumps. And every time he made contact, Ren Baqian's heart would tremble once. Your Majesty, I fastened it. After Ren Baqian fastened the straps, he finally wiped the sweat off his forehead. Get out. Chapter 146. After a long time, the Empress changed her clothes and came out of the room. Ren Baqian's eyes immediately lit up. Even though she was still wearing a red dress, the modern and exquisite red dress gave off a different vibe. She became more charming. However, her expression was still as cold as ever, seemingly colder than before. This greatly reduced her charm. Let's go out and take a look, the Empress said coldly. The Empress said coldly. It was as if nothing had happened just now and she had returned to her original state. Ren Baqian suddenly felt that the Empress who was trembling slightly in the room was just his imagination. The one in front of him was the real Empress. This was what the Empress should look like. All right. Ren Baqian nodded his head. He went back to his room to change his clothes, took his wallet and keys, cut off the label on his coat, and draped it over the Empress. It's a little cold outside. Even though you won't be affected, you still have to put on a show for ordinary people, Ren Baqian said softly. Even though he felt that the lady he saw in the room just now was an illusion, there were still some changes in his heart. Some soft spots in the bottom of his heart were touched. He didn't know if he was more afraid of the Empress or if he had more feelings for her. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't moved when such a lady chose him as her husband. It was just that the Empress's might had completely suppressed this feeling in his heart. At this moment, this feeling sprouted again. It was just that he didn't know when it would blossom. The Empress didn't reject him and didn't look at him. She just stood there and let him drape the coat over her. The coat was black and made of wool. The style was very simple, but it was also very easy to match. Jiangnan had indeed put in a lot of effort. After draping the coat over the Empress, the two of them went out and took the elevator down. Rinpoche conveniently explained, "This is an elevator, it can transport people and goods up and down quickly." The Empress could feel a slight sense of weightlessness. "What's written on it?" The Empress finally opened her mouth and pointed to the button. "It's written in numbers 1, 2, 3. Each number represents a floor," Rinpoche patiently explained. The Empress slowly memorized these numbers in her heart. "It's out, I want to see what it looks like." Qin Qing sat in the driver's seat with a smile on his face as he looked at the two people walking out from a distance. "You're too naughty." Jiangnan smiled gently. She knew that Qin Qing was just curious. As the two of them approached, their eyes widened in shock. The lady walking beside Rinpoche was like a fairy from the world. Even in modern society, people had seen countless celebrities and idols, but this lady gave off a different vibe. She was classical, elegant, and all kinds of words could be used to describe her. Even a girl from Jiangnan was captivated. "Pinch me, I want to see if I'm dreaming. Where did 8,000-year-old find such a person?" Qin Qing smacked his lips. "What do you think?" Jiangnan glared at him. "It's too high and too cold. I can only look at it from afar. It's out of my league." Qin Qing shook his head. Yes, he was too tall and too cold. If someone said that such a person didn't have a background, he wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. She was from a small family. No matter how beautiful she was, it was impossible for her to give others such a feeling. Even a rich second generation like Qin Qing felt that he could not get close to her. Nowadays people, especially those who had some family background, had more or less seen the world. They could more or less tell a person's social class. It was impossible for them to not have this little bit of discernment. "I just want someone to grow old with. As for those who are too high class, let's stay away from them." Qin Qing held Jiangnan's hand and said. Jiangnan felt the warmth on her hand and revealed a smile. "However, I'm really curious how she got together with 8,000-year-old. Qin Qing's words made Jiangnan nod her head. A phoenix couldn't travel together with a sparrow. However, this scene happened in front of the two of them. Rinpoche didn't notice the two of them. The Empress noticed them but ignored them. Why would she care about the gazes of ordinary people? The two of them were in the underground car park. The Empress looked at the steel beasts on both sides curiously. Rinpoche pulled out the front passenger seat for her. This way it would be easier for the two of them to talk and introduce some things to her. As Rinpoche drove the car out of the car park steadily, the Empress asked, "This is the thing that you said can run without a horse, right? This is driven by gasoline and is completely mechanical. It's the main mode of transportation for the people here." Rinpoche nodded his head and explained. The Empress remembered what he said very clearly. Just now the Empress did see a lot of cars in the underground car park. This kind of thing was very common here. It was still snowing outside. Rinpoche drove at a moderate speed, allowing the Empress to clearly see the scenery on both sides. When they first left the neighborhood it was still a little secluded. As the car moved forward, the number of cars in the surroundings started to increase. There were more and more people on both sides of the road. The storefronts were getting more and more beautiful and the buildings were getting taller and taller. At this moment, the sky was almost dark. The storefronts on both sides of the road had switched on their lights. The signboards were also lit up. The street lights were also switched on. Everywhere was filled with splendid lights. The Empress stared outside and didn't speak to Rinpoche. Everything that she saw in front of her had indeed shocked her. Even though she saw a lot of things in the room, it was more of a novelty. What she saw now was a highly developed society. It was a society that was completely different from Dayo. Just by looking at the clothes of the passers-by, the buildings, and those splendid lights, one could see the level of development of this world. Who built those lights on the pole? The Empress looked at the street lights that were placed at intervals and finally couldn't help but ask. From just now until now, she didn't see any dark places. Everywhere was sprinkled with lights. In addition to the fluttering snow outside, this was really a dreamlike city. It's built for the city? It can be considered as a city's basic construction. There are many basic constructions in a city. For example, drainage facilities like sewers, basic electricity, running water, street lights, and roads are all part of a city's basic construction. In addition, there are also public facilities like plazas, parks, and other places for people to relax and entertain, Rinpoche explained to the Empress while staring at the road with rapt attention. Will my country become like this one day? The Empress looked at the surrounding scenery with envy in her eyes. Such a scenery made it impossible for her to remain indifferent. With me around, it will definitely be possible. Rinpoche finally shifted his gaze from the road in front of him to the Empress and said energetically. Chapter 147. We're here. Rinpoche stopped the car and opened the door for the Empress. To the onlookers he looked like a gentleman. Snow fell on their heads. The Empress looked up at the sky happily. Under the illumination of the lights, snowflakes fell like fairies in the night sky and landed on her head and body. However, when they landed on the Empress's hair, they instantly disappeared. Let's go in. Rinpoche tightened the Empress's coat. The two of them were in a relatively large supermarket. Rinpoche felt that the Empress might be more interested in this place. This was the best place to observe the daily lives of ordinary people in China. There are a lot of people. The Empress looked at the entrance of the supermarket and said, in Dayo there wasn't such a dense flow of people. Of course, there wasn't such a large store either. Rinpoche and the Empress walked in side by side. It wasn't suitable to walk half a step behind. Furthermore, Rinpoche had to help the Empress fend off the surrounding people. Whether it was because he was afraid of the Empress's anger or because the Empress was his future wife in name, his actions were very natural. To outsiders there wasn't anything strange about it. Rinpoche didn't know what he was feeling at the moment. He just wanted to do it. Perhaps it was more of the former, but it wasn't necessarily the latter. However, Rinpoche quickly realized that even though there were people coming and going here, everyone subconsciously changed their movements when they got close to the Empress. No one was within half a meter of her. The most eye-catching thing about the Empress was that she was too beautiful, especially with her temperament. That kind of nobility and indifference combined together made her look like someone who shouldn't be in this place. Even though she gave off a cold feeling, she still attracted the attention of passers-by. The two of them entered the supermarket. Rinpoche pushed a cart and walked side by side with the Empress. The Empress's gaze was on the dazzling lineup of goods on both sides. There were so many goods that she was dazzled. These are potato chips, considered a type of snack. They aren't very healthy. Every time Rinpoche noticed that the Empress's gaze lingered on an item, he would softly explain and put the item into the cart basket. These are biscuits, a food that is occasionally used to satisfy one's hunger. The taste depends on one's personal preference. These are canned fruits that are drained and can be stored for a long time. This is salt. When Rinpoche mentioned salt, the Empress picked up the bag of salt, observed it carefully and said, it's very white, almost the same as the salt used in the palace. How much can one tael of silver buy? Rinpoche did some calculations. One tael of silver was 500 grams, which was about 2,000 yuan. I can buy 1,000 bags. The Empress looked at Rinpoche and said, in Dayo 1 tael of silver can only buy so much. Rinpoche nodded. He understood this matter. In Dayo 1 tael of silver could buy a caddy of salt. Furthermore, the salt was coarse and had a poor color. This kind of fine salt could only be bought with 1 tael of silver. The difference between the two worlds was 1,000 times. I want this. If we go to war with Great Xia, I'm afraid it will be very difficult to buy it from the Yin nation and the Qin nation. The Empress turned her head and looked at Rinpoche. Her eyes were filled with vigor as she waited for his reply. For the first time the word yes was added to her words. I want this, and I want this. Even though there was only a difference of one word, the feeling it gave off was very different. Rinpoche hesitated for a while and said, I know a place that can produce salt. It's on Nine Peaks Mountain in the southwest of Lan City. I heard that there's a poisonous black pond there that can be filtered to produce well salt. However, I don't have much confidence in this matter, so I didn't tell you. I originally wanted to talk about this matter after the sweet potatoes are ripe. If you can do what you said, I will remember your great merit. After we return and settle the matter of the iron or mine, we will settle this first. If we can produce salt, we will have less apprehension in the future and won't have to worry about other things when we go to war with Great Xia. After all, if the commoners don't have salt to eat, they won't be able to survive, the Empress said as she looked at Rinpoche. I understand. I will do my best to settle these matters. Ren Baqin nodded. The Empress carefully looked into his eyes and nodded her head. The two of them continued to move forward. Even though they didn't pay attention, many people nearby were looking at them. Or rather, they were looking at the Empress. This is a toothbrush and toothpaste for brushing teeth. There's no need to use willow twigs. This is a shower gel and shampoo. Ren Baqin was putting the things into the cart as he pushed the cart. These were all things that he prepared for the Empress. At this moment he really felt like a couple shopping in a supermarket. If they did this often it wouldn't be too bad. Regardless of whether it was the daily necessities or the food, there were many different brands. The variety made the Empress exclaim in admiration. The variety of goods in Dayo was really too little and couldn't be compared at all. Finally, the two of them picked some fruits and vegetables that the Empress was interested in before paying the bill and leaving. A few men who had been following them and looking at them from afar felt a little lost. Their hearts were filled with envy, jealousy, and hatred for Ren Baqin. After walking one round in the supermarket, the Empress had a clearer understanding of the abundance and variety of goods on earth. At the same time, she also observed the appearance of the ordinary people in the supermarket. Indeed, just like what Ren Baqin said, they were living a rich life. She could feel the disparity between them and this made her a little envious. No matter which emperor it was, they all hoped that their country would become like this. When the two of them sat in the cart, Ren Baqin laughed and said, "It seems like I'm not the only one who thinks that you are a fairy." Just now many people felt the same way. Many of them were looking at us, but in fact they were looking at you. I don't know if I should dig their eyes out. This was half a joke and half a truth. The Empress tilted her head and looked at him. Do you really think so? Ren Baqin nodded. Then don't lie to me in the future. After saying this, the Empress turned her face outside the window. This wasn't the first time she said that she didn't like to be lied to and was even a little worried about being lied to. When she said such words, it always made people feel that she wasn't like what she looked like on the outside. She was actually very meticulous. Even though she gave people the impression that she was overbearing, tyrannical, dignified, and cold. Ren Baqin felt that there was a hidden meaning in her words this time around. He was silent for a while and didn't know if it was his misconception. He couldn't help but think of the monk's words, "A sharp tongue is just a small trick. Only sincerity can be exchanged for sincerity." His heart trembled slightly, but he said, "Your Majesty, there's a type of bird in this world that never lands on the ground from birth. It keeps flying in the sky and only lands on the ground when it dies. It's the same for me. Ever since I met your Majesty, I have been chasing after your Majesty's brilliance. I won't stop until I die, just like that kind of bird that pursues the sky. The difference between us is that even if I die, even if I'm in the netherworld, I will still raise my head and look up at your Majesty. No one has ever said such words to me before. I will believe it." The Empress was silent for a while and sighed softly. At this moment, her mind was in a mess. She wanted to slap this fellow who was disturbing her state of mind to death. It seemed like a very simple thing, but she couldn't lift her palm no matter how hard she tried. This wasn't the first time. It was the same for her the last time. However, she couldn't lift her palm both times. She didn't know why she said such weak words. She only felt that her heart was trembling. Ren Baqin tilted his head and looked at the Empress, who had turned her head to look outside. At this moment, the Empress gave Ren Baqin the feeling of a fairy that had descended to the mortal world. It gave him an indescribable impulse. It was even more intense than when he was in that room in the afternoon. "This is arranged by heaven. Heaven is the greatest." Ren Baqin finally said this sentence. He was saying this to the Empress as well as himself. Chapter 148. His Majesty hasn't been found yet. If there's any news, we'll send it back immediately. In a mansion, two old men sat opposite each other. One of them frowned slightly. That demon should have been killed long ago. Otherwise, such a thing wouldn't have happened. If anything were to happen to His Majesty, the consequences would be unimaginable. The one who spoke was Junior Elder Zhikohai. Opposite him was the Great Elder Shiqing. His eyes were shut and his face was filled with worry. The disappearance of the Empress was too big of a deal. Even though Xenzhou was suppressing it as time passed, the others also felt that something was amiss. In the evening, these two big shots entered the palace together. Only then did they realize that Xenzhou actually dared to suppress such a huge matter. At this time, the monitoring division was conducting a massive search in the city. The left army had also been mobilized to search the vicinity of Lan City. Such a big move had already aroused many people's suspicions. This matter could at most be suppressed for another day. If Her Majesty could not be found by noon tomorrow, it would really be a mess. I think we should inform the General-in-Chief who supports the nation about this, Zhikohai said after thinking for a long time. There's no need for that now. If we can't find His Majesty by noon tomorrow, we'll have to inform the General-in-Chief who supports the nation to make preparations, Shi Qing sighed. Xinjia also deserves to die. She was protecting Her Majesty, but Her Majesty went missing in the palace. Yet she still tried in vain to suppress the matter and hide it. Damn it. If it wasn't for the fact that she still had to lead the palace guards in the search, she would have been thrown into prison first. It was His Majesty who insisted on beheading her in public, Zhikohai continued. Shi Qing continued to close his eyes in silence. Now, his eyebrows were almost twisted into a fried dough twist, and his already wrinkled face looked even older. The two of them sat facing each other from late at night until dawn. Zhikohai stood up and said, "An entire night has passed and there's still no news. It's best to prepare early." Shi Qing, who had been sitting there all this while, suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes shone brightly as he asked, "What are you doing?" Zhikohai lowered his head to look at Shi Qing and said, "If His Majesty is not found by today, then someone will definitely find out and there will be chaos. We should prepare for this matter as soon as possible." Shi Qing stared at him for a long time before closing his eyes again. Zhikohai left the house and snorted coldly after getting into the car. His Majesty had been missing for a day and a night in the palace. It was possible that he would never return. If they still couldn't find His Majesty after a few days, they could ask that person to come back. At this moment, there were still a few guards standing guard in Yangxin Palace Hall. As the air in the hall suddenly distorted, two people suddenly appeared here. "Oh, Your Majesty." When the guards saw the two people in the hall, they were overjoyed and knelt on one knee. The ones who appeared in the hall were naturally Ren Baqin and the Empress. Ren Baqin was wearing a pair of casual pants and a shirt. The Empress was wearing a long red dress, but she had already changed into a new one. The Empress released her grip on Ren Baqin's hand, turned around, took a few steps back to the couch and sat down. She then asked coldly, "How long have I been gone?" "Your Majesty, it has already been 20 hours. What happened? Where are Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan? Call Xinjia over as well." After the Empress spoke, the imperial guards below immediately responded, and two of them hurriedly ran out. The remaining two told her some things that they knew. For example, Xinjia ordered all the imperial guards to search the palace. At the same time, she suppressed the news and let the Department of Inspection conduct a large-scale search in Lan City. However, because the movement was too big, it attracted the attention of the two elders. After discovering that the Empress was missing, she informed the left army to search outside the city. Also, Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were locked up in the side hall and were guarded. In short, the day that the Empress went missing had alarmed many people. After all, with her status, every move of hers would set off a lot of waves, let alone a matter like her disappearance. After a while, Xinjia walked into the hall in big strides wearing her helmet and armor. Her face was full of joy. "Greetings, Your Majesty." The Empress nodded slightly and said, "Well done. Get someone to inform the Great Elder and Junior Elder to enter the palace. Get the left army and the Department of Inspection to stop as well. Get Kuyong and Lei Yu to see me. In addition, all of you are dismissed." "Yes, Your Majesty. I will take my leave." Xinjia and the other two imperial guards responded and strode away. After they left, the Empress looked at Ren Baqin and said in a slightly gentler voice, "You should go back and rest. Don't delay your cultivation." "Your Majesty, I will take my leave." After Ren Baqin finished speaking to the Empress, he turned around and left the palace. Not long after, he met Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan, who were rushing over. They glared at him fiercely. He actually went missing with the Empress and even implicated the two of them. It wasn't to the extent of feeling aggrieved, but they were somewhat resentful towards Ren Baqin. On the contrary, Ren Baqin returned to Pingle Park with a good-natured smile on his face. He only sighed when he returned to his room. During these 2 days on Earth, the Empress had become much gentler. Ren Baqin could see her envy, uneasiness, curiosity, and various other emotions. She was becoming more and more like an ordinary person. However, after returning to Dayo, she had reverted back to her original high and mighty Empress. On the contrary, Ren Baqin felt that the Empress, who was dressed in red, sitting on the sofa, eating ice cream and watching the news while he was cooking breakfast in the kitchen, was much more likable to him. This dignified and cold empress always made him feel extremely pressured. After dispelling the thoughts in his mind, Renbachian calculated the time taken for this round trip. It was 2.5 days on Earth, which was equivalent to 20 hours here. Renbachian was prepared to see how long he could stay in this world if he didn't take the initiative to go back. After sitting on the bed for a while, Renbachian threw these distracting thoughts aside and immersed his mind into the visualization of water, of Rui visualization. Once again he appeared beside that lake. Not many people knew about the disappearance of the Empress. Most people only knew that the husband chosen by the Empress had suddenly gone missing in the palace. The Department of Inspection had conducted a massive search in the city and stopped after a day. It was said that they had found him. Shi Qing heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing the news of the Empress's return. The wrinkles on his face had also smoothed out. When Zhikohai heard this news he was stunned for a long time. In the end, he entered the palace without saying a word to the Empress. When he arrived at the palace gate he already saw Shi Qing's car parked there. "Your Majesty is back." Shi Qing smiled meaningfully at Zhikohai. "This is great news. I'm also relieved." Zhikohai smiled as well. Both of them entered the palace together to see the Empress. "I wonder where did your Majesty go this time?" Shi Qing immediately asked after seeing the Empress. "A rather interesting place," the Empress replied casually. To her, Earth was indeed very interesting. Civilization, prosperity, and extremely powerful machines. This was her biggest impression of Earth. She hoped that one day Deo could also be like this. "I shouldn't interfere with your Majesty's whereabouts. However, I feel that it's better to inform your Majesty first if you have any matters to attend to next time. Furthermore, you shouldn't travel alone," Shi Qing continued. "I understand. You don't have to think too much about this matter." The Empress waved her hand. "I called both of you here to inform you that I'm fine. If there's nothing else, both of you may leave. Your Majesty's disappearance this time has caused a great impact. Everyone in the palace is in a state of panic. Before this, your Majesty has never been in such a state. Furthermore, it's not possible for someone to suddenly disappear from the palace. I believe that Renbachian used demonic magic to bewitch your Majesty. Your Majesty, please kill this person and choose another husband," Zhikohai suddenly said. Chapter 149. Your Majesty, please kill this man and choose another husband, Zhikohai suddenly said. The Empress narrowed her eyes and a cold glint flickered in her eyes. The next second, the Empress appeared in front of Zhikohai, grabbed him by the throat and lifted him up. Your Majesty, please show mercy. Shi Qing's expression changed. Although he didn't like Zhikohai, he couldn't let him die. The Empress carried Zhikohai and stared into his eyes until his face turned red and he was almost out of breath. Only then did she casually throw him aside. "It's none of your business to meddle in my affairs. You may leave," the Empress said coldly and turned back to her couch. Zhikohai covered his throat as he gasped for air. Then he got up, bowed to the Empress and left. Outside the palace, Shi Qing looked at Zhikohai and asked, "Why did you say that?" "His Majesty's private affairs are not for us to interfere." This was something he could not understand. This is no longer a private matter. He has bewitched His Majesty in the palace and will inevitably cause a great disaster in the future. I feel that even if your Majesty doesn't like it as a subject, I still have to remind your Majesty, Zhikohai said. Shi Qing looked at Zhikohai, not saying a word for a long time. He didn't believe Zhikohai's words. The person in front of him was the one who disliked the Empress the most. The person with the most complicated thoughts was also the person in front of him. Sometimes, Shi Qing even felt that he was just wearing the skin of an aboriginal. Shi Qing would never believe that he was doing this for the good of His Majesty, risking his life and risking the wrath of His Majesty. So what was his goal? Watching Zhikohai get into the car and leave, Shi Qing stood there for a long time before he shook his head slightly and stopped thinking about him. He had too many thoughts on his mind. However, where exactly did Her Majesty and storyteller Rin go? He was also extremely curious. He just knew that if His Majesty wanted to tell him, he would naturally know. If His Majesty didn't want to say it, then there was no need for him to ask. The Empress sighed a long time after the two of them had left. Your Majesty, what's wrong? Is something bothering you? Hong Wan took a few steps forward and massaged the Empress's shoulders. Pour some wine for me, the Empress ordered. Although it was early in the morning, she still felt that it was in the evening before they returned. She liked to drink. She could suppress everything. This was her way of soothing her mood, whether it was when he was bored or when he had something on his mind. At this moment, her heart was in a mess. After Rinpoche was done with the visualization of water, he slept in his room for the entire morning. He only woke up when the maid who delivered the vegetables knocked on his door. Rinpoche waited for her to leave before he sat down at the table. Before he even picked up his chopsticks, he could already smell that something was amiss. There were familiar spices and familiar dishes. This was prepared by the imperial kitchen. Previously, the imperial kitchen was only in charge of the Empress's meals. Everyone else, including Rinpoche, was in charge of another organization. Was this arranged by the Empress? Rinpoche thought. Other than this, there was no other explanation. From this, it could be seen that the treatment he received this time was indeed different. When he thought of the Empress, many complicated and indescribable feelings welled up in his heart. What a pity, I didn't expect that she would really come back this time. I didn't even bring anything with me. Maybe next time. Rinpoche thought of the pile of clothes and snacks that he bought for the Empress and found it somewhat funny. The Empress loved to say, "I want this." Compared to "I want this," it was less domineering and more gentle. After Rinpoche finished his meal, he got up and went to Qingxin Palace Hall. It was better for him to learn how to read first. After entering, Rinpoche immediately threw a handful of candies on the table. The originally drowsy Lin Xiaola immediately became spirited. She looked at Rinpoche with her bright eyes, just like a husky begging for food. "Continue to teach me how to read. Today I will use a different method. Tell me word by word and I will go back to practice by myself," Rinpoche said. "Sure." Lin Xiaola nodded her head. However, not long after, she sensed that something was amiss. Even though Rinpoche didn't know the language here, he would usually use a language that he couldn't understand to record. This let Lin Xiaola know that he was actually literate, just that he didn't know the language of Great Xia. That's right, the language used in Dayo was Great Xia's language. Even though the Aboriginals also had a language, it was limited and completely insufficient to express themselves. Today, Rinpoche didn't use the stupid method of slowly practicing word by word. He directly asked for a word and wrote a note at the back. This way it wouldn't take long for him to learn everything that he knew. When that time came, he wouldn't be able to use her, and where would she find candies? "I don't want to teach any more." Lin Xiaola immediately pushed the table and leaned back. Her face was filled with unhappiness. "What's wrong?" Rinpoche raised his head and saw that she was throwing a tantrum. "If I teach like this, I will learn it in less than 5 days, Lin Xiaola mumbled. Rinpoche was amused to see her like this. He didn't even need to think to know what she was thinking. "I will bring you more next time. In the future, I will open a shop that specializes in selling candies. Your salary will definitely be enough, right?" After hearing what he said, Lin Xiaola's worries turned into joy. "You are right, I want 10 times more candies tomorrow." "Sure." Rinpoche felt that this little girl was too easy to fool. In any case, he only had a few more days to learn. Furthermore, his current status was different, and he didn't need to be as careful as before. As such, he didn't really care about these things. Previously, he brought some candies with him and gave them to the Empress. There were still some left. In one afternoon, Rinpoche memorized more than 300 characters. He had also learned quite a lot previously. In another 5 to 6 days he would be able to memorize all of them. At the same time, he had an idea. When he returned to Yangxin Palace Hall, he would create a comparison table between this character and Chinese characters. At that time, he would hire a few programmers to create a comparison software that could directly translate the Chinese characters from the book. This would save him a lot of trouble. After leaving Qingxin Palace Hall, just as he reached the entrance of Pingle Park, the imperial bodyguard called out to him, "Storyteller Rin, Her Majesty summons you to Yangxin Palace Hall to accompany her for a meal." Rinpoche nodded his head. He placed the notebook that was filled with annotations back in his room before heading to Yangxin Palace Hall to meet Her Majesty. As always, it was cold and empty. The Empress had changed back to her usual red muslin dress and a white undergarment. She sat alone on the couch with a table in front of her. There were 4 dishes and a soup on it. There was also a chair in front of the table. "Your Majesty," Rinpoche greeted her. He looked around and didn't see Qing Yuan or Hong Yuan. The Empress was the only one in the empty palace hall. "Have a seat." When the Empress saw Rinpoche's arrival, she felt a little happy. Her heart was moved a few times, but she eventually said, "Have a seat." Indeed, this was the Empress. Rinpoche thought as he sat down. During the meal, the two of them didn't speak anymore. Rinpoche always moved the dishes that the Empress wanted to eat in front of her. This made her feel warmth flowing in her heart. The same thing done by different people, gave her different feelings. After dinner, the Empress asked, "When are you preparing to set off?" Rinpoche understood that she was talking about the iron or mine. This matter had always been the top priority in her heart. Chapter 150. Friendly reminder, the original chapters 145 and 146 have become 146 and 147. The contents of the original chapter 145 have been changed. One more chapter has been added. "Your Majesty, please kill this man and choose another husband," Zhikohai suddenly said. The Empress narrowed her eyes and a cold glint flickered in her eyes. The next second, the Empress appeared in front of Zhikohai, grabbed him by the throat and lifted him up. "Your Majesty, please show mercy." Shi Qing's expression changed. Although he didn't like Zhikohai, he couldn't let him die. The Empress carried Zhikohai and stared into his eyes until his face turned red and he was almost out of breath. Only then did she casually throw him aside. "It's none of your business to meddle in my affairs. You may leave," the Empress said coldly and turned back to her couch. Zhikohai covered his throat as he gasped for air. Then he got up, bowed to the Empress and left. Outside the palace, Shi Qing looked at Zhikohai and asked, "Why did you say that?" "His Majesty's private affairs are not for us to interfere." This was something he could not understand. This is no longer a private matter. He has bewitched His Majesty in the palace and will inevitably cause a great disaster in the future. I feel that even if Your Majesty doesn't like it as a subject, I still have to remind Your Majesty, Zhikohai said. Shi Qing looked at Zhikohai, not saying a word for a long time. He didn't believe Zhikohai's words. The person in front of him was the one who disliked the Empress the most. The person with the most complicated thoughts was also the person in front of him. Sometimes, Shi Qing even felt that he was just wearing the skin of an aboriginal. Shi Qing would never believe that he was doing this for the good of His Majesty, risking his own life and risking the wrath of His Majesty. So what was his goal? Watching Zhikohai get into the car and leave, Shi Qing stood there for a long time before he shook his head slightly and stopped thinking about him. He had too many thoughts on his mind. However, where exactly did Her Majesty and storyteller Rin go? He was also extremely curious. He just knew that if His Majesty wanted to tell him, he would naturally know. If His Majesty didn't want to say it, then there was no need for him to ask. The Empress sighed a long time after the two of them had left. "Your Majesty, what's wrong? Is something bothering you?" Hong Wan took a few steps forward and massaged the Empress's shoulders. "Pour some wine for me," the Empress ordered. Although it was early in the morning, she still felt that it was in the evening before they returned. She liked to drink. She could suppress everything. This was her way of soothing her mood, especially when his heart was in a mess. At this moment, her heart was in a mess. After Rinpoche was done with the visualization of water, he slept in his room for the entire morning. He only woke up when the maid who delivered the vegetables knocked on his door. Rinpoche waited for her to leave before he sat down at the table. Before he even picked up his chopsticks, he could already smell that something was amiss. There were familiar spices and familiar dishes. This was prepared by the Imperial Kitchen. Previously, the Imperial Kitchen was only in charge of the Empress's meals. Everyone else, including Rinpoche, was in charge of another organization. Was this arranged by the Empress? Rinpoche thought. Other than this, there was no other explanation. From this, it could be seen that the treatment he received this time was indeed different. When he thought of the Empress, many complicated and indescribable feelings welled up in his heart. What a pity, I didn't expect that she would really come back this time. I didn't even bring anything with me. Maybe next time. Rinpoche thought of the pile of clothes and snacks that he bought for the Empress and found it somewhat funny. The Empress liked to say the most, "I want this." Compared to "I want this," it was less overbearing and more gentle. After Rinpoche finished his meal, he got up and went to Qingshin Palace Hall. It was better for him to learn how to read first. After entering, Rinpoche immediately threw a handful of candies on the table. The originally drowsy Lin Xiaola immediately became spirited. She looked at Rinpoche with her bright eyes, just like a husky begging for food. "Continue to teach me how to read. Today I will use a different method. Tell me word by word and I will go back to practice by myself," Rinpoche said. "Sure." Lin Xiaola nodded her head. However, not long after, she sensed that something was wrong. Even though Rinpoche didn't know the language here, he would usually use a language that he didn't understand to record down. This made Lin Xiaola know that he was actually literate, just that he didn't know the language of Great Xia. That's right, the language used in Dayo was Great Xia's language. Even though the Aboriginals also had a language, it was limited and completely insufficient to express themselves. Today, Rinpoche didn't use the stupid method of slowly practicing word by word. He directly asked for a word and wrote a note at the back. This way he would learn everything that she knew in no time. When that time came, he wouldn't be able to use her anymore. How would she get candies then? I don't want to teach anymore. Lin Xiaola immediately pushed the table and leaned back. Her face was filled with unhappiness. What's wrong? Rinpoche raised his head and saw her throwing a tantrum. If I teach like this, I will learn it in less than 5 days, Lin Xiaola mumbled. Rinpoche was amused to see her like this. He didn't even need to think to know what she was thinking. I will bring you more next time. In the future, I will open a shop that specializes in selling candies. Your salary will definitely be enough, right? After hearing what he said, Lin Xiaola's worries turned into joy. You are right. I want 10 times more candies tomorrow. Sure. Rinpoche felt that this little girl was too easy to fool. In any case, he only had a few more days to learn. Furthermore, his current status was different. He didn't need to be as careful as before. As such, he didn't really care about these things. After taking out the ones that he brought with him and giving them to the Empress, there were still some left. In one afternoon, Rinpoche memorized more than 300 words. He had also learned quite a lot previously. In another 5 to 6 days he would be able to memorize all of them. At the same time, he had an idea. When he returned to Yangxin Palace Hall, he would make a comparison table between this word and Chinese characters. At that time, he would hire a few programmers to make a comparison software that could directly translate the Chinese characters from the book. This would save him a lot of trouble. After leaving Qingxin Palace Hall and arriving at the entrance of Pingle Park, the Imperial Guard called out to him, "Storyteller Rin, Her Majesty summons you to Yangxin Palace Hall to accompany her for a meal." Rinpoche nodded his head. He first placed the note that was filled with annotations back in his room before going to Yangxin Palace Hall to see Her Majesty. It was as cold and empty as ever. The Empress had changed back to her usual red muslin dress and white undergarment. She sat alone on the couch with a table in front of her. There were 4 dishes and a soup on it. There was also a chair in front of the table. "Your Majesty." Rinpoche greeted her. He looked around and didn't see Qing Yuan and Hong Luan. The Empress was the only one in the empty hall. "Have a seat." When the Empress saw Rinpoche's arrival, she felt a little happy. Her heart was moved a few times, but in the end she only said, "Have a seat." Indeed, this was the Empress. Rinpoche thought to himself as he sat down. During the meal, the two of them didn't speak anymore. Rinpoche always moved the dishes that the Empress wanted to eat in front of her. This made her feel warm in her heart. The same thing, done by different people, gave her different feelings. After dinner, the Empress asked, "When are you preparing to set off?" Rinpoche understood that she was talking about the iron or mine. This matter had always been the top priority in her heart. Chapter 151. After hearing Rinpoche's words, the Empress nodded her head and said, "All right, I will get someone to send the herbs to you tomorrow morning. After you are done with your training, come and find me. I will bring you to the palace treasury to get some things." Rinpoche felt a little awkward when he heard this. Using the Empress's wealth to buy things on earth, he suddenly felt that he was living off a woman. Unfortunately, it would take a long time before he could get his income from earth. He had to spend a lot of time and energy to make all kinds of things to earn money. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would really be living off a woman. However, when he thought about the martial arts and herbs provided by the Empress, it seemed that he was destined to live off a woman. "What are you thinking about?" the Empress asked when she saw that he was silent. "I just feel that I am living off a woman," Rinpoche said awkwardly. Then, facing the Empress's probing gaze, he explained the meaning of living off a woman. "Why, don't you want to eat?" The Empress's beautiful eyes wandered and her voice carried a trace of a different meaning. Rinpoche's heart trembled when he saw this. "Just treat it as buying it for me," the Empress continued. "I know." Rinpoche nodded his head. The Empress was always so cold. When she occasionally looked at him with a gentle and charming gaze, it was as if a fairy had turned into an ordinary person. It was exceptionally captivating. After accompanying the Empress for a while, Rinpoche got up and left. Qing Yuan and Hong Luan saw him coming out from outside and entered Yangxin Palace Hall. After Rinpoche left, the Empress reverted to her original appearance. She just felt that the palace was exceptionally cold. Early the next morning, 5 or 6 people came in carrying bundles of paper bags and placed them in another room in Pingle Park. Soon after, they began to fetch water to start a fire and made a large tub of medicinal water. Storyteller Rin, you need to cultivate in this medicinal bath to absorb the medicinal power, a woman around 30 years old said to Rinpoche. Rinpoche nodded his head. He had already understood all these from Rui visualization. Everyone first added the medicinal herbs into the tub and then boiled the water. The water immediately turned into a strange dark green color. After the water temperature dropped, they continued to use a small fire to maintain the temperature. Rinpoche stared at the strange dark green liquid for a long time before putting on his shorts and stepping into it. It's so hot. Rinpoche sucked in a breath of cold air. The temperature was at least 40 degrees Celsius. Stepping in like this caused his entire body to turn red, and he felt as if he was being cooked. The crackling of the firewood under the barrel made him feel like he was stewing a pot of soup. However, he quickly cleared away the distracting thoughts in his mind and started to visualize the visualization of water. After a while, Rinpoche opened his eyes helplessly and said to the people around him, "I'll have to trouble the few of you to go outside the courtyard. I'm not used to all of you standing here. I'm afraid of strangers. You can come in later." After they left, he closed his eyes and started to visualize again. Even though there was still the sound of burning firewood, it didn't affect him much. It was still filled with a faint mist and he couldn't see far into the distance. Only the lake and a few trees seemed to exist. Rinpoche walked into the lake. When he started to swim forward, he started to realize that something was wrong. The surrounding water started to form waves. Even though it wasn't big, it was more exhausting than the stagnant water he used to swim in. Moreover, there were traces of dark green things in the water that looked like aquatic plants that wrapped around his body. It was as if he was carrying a heavy object on his back and swam even slower. It took him a longer time to swim to the center of the lake. Then he tried his best to dive down. This time, he woke up from exhaustion before he could reach his previous position. Rinpoche shook his head. He was still mentally exhausted and his body was swollen in pain. When he looked down at the medicinal bath below him, the color had become much lighter. It seemed like the medicinal efficacy had been absorbed into his body. The medicinal efficacy of this medicinal bath would take at least a week to be digested and gradually change his body. Rinpoche returned to his bed to rest for a while before looking for the Empress. However, the Empress hadn't come down from the court session yet, so he waited outside Yangshin Palace Hall. After a long time, Rinpoche heard voices from afar and knew that the Empress had returned. "All of you can leave. Exenja, you don't have to follow me." The Empress waved her hand at the people behind her. After everyone left, she said to Rinpoche, "Follow me." The inner treasury of the palace was located in a rather secretive place in the palace. It was completely made of stone and didn't have any windows. After the thick metal door was opened, the imperial bodyguard passed the torch to the both of them and left. Rinpoche held the torch and followed the Empress. Under the Empress's guidance, they lit up the braziers in the inner treasury. At this moment, the inner treasury was lit up. This place was smaller than what Rinpoche had imagined. It was divided into 2 levels. On one level there were many shelves with swords, weapons and armors. On the surrounding walls there were boxes of gold, silver, jewelry and the like. These were all gifts from the Empress during her birthday celebration. Most of them were gold and silver. Only a few small boxes contained jewelry. On the second level there were many cubicles and shelves. There were a lot fewer items. Rinpoche walked around the inner treasury. They were all rare and precious treasures. Their value was indeed very high. Many of them couldn't be found on Earth. Such rare items might be able to be sold for a good price on Earth, but it was too difficult to sell them. He was just an ordinary person and didn't have the means to sell these items. "Your Majesty, let's go back to the first level. Even though the items here are very valuable, it's difficult to sell them," Rinpoche told the Empress honestly. "All right." On the first level, Rinpoche finally chose a few pieces of jade pendants, jade talismans, rubies and emeralds before stopping. "Take a few more. I keep these items with me," the Empress said to Rinpoche. "I'll take these first. It's inconvenient to carry too many with me. This time around I want to test how many days I can stay here. It's very likely that I'll be sent back suddenly. Therefore I can carry these items with me at all times," Rinpoche said. In the palace of the capital of Great Xia, a dignified-looking old man sat on a chair. 6 people were kneeling before him. "Who is it? How dare they assassinate the prince?" The old man was the current emperor of Great Xia. At this moment, his face was filled with uncontrollable anger. The Prince of Great Xia was assassinated? How many years had it been since this had happened? They were simply audacious to the extreme and treated the royal family of Great Xia as nothing. Your Majesty, the 7th Prince arrived at Kaiping 5 days ago. He stayed for a night before setting off. 3 days ago he was assassinated in Wulong Valley. Among the 7th Prince's entourage, there were 95 people at the intermediate level of the human realm, 5 people at the advanced level of the human realm, 1 person at the intermediate level of the earth realm, and 2 consecrated people at the earth embryo realm. None of them survived. In addition, a caravan that was returning from Dayo was also assassinated. None of them survived. Presumably it was because they saw the murderer. To be able to kill all of the 7th Prince's entourage, this kind of strength wasn't something an ordinary person could achieve. Even though the scene had been cleaned up, there were still some traces left behind. According to the investigators at the scene, it was suspected to be the Aboriginals. However, I don't have any clearer evidence to prove it. I also didn't find any reason for Qi Zixiao or Hong Wu to attack the 7th Prince. I want them to pay the price. Chapter 152. The Great Xia dynasty's Lian family, as a second-rate aristocratic family in Great Xia, was considered the #1 family in the Zhejiang prefecture. No matter what time it was, the entrance would always be bustling with activity. However, for the past 2 days, no one could be seen outside the door. The entire Lian family was covered in dark clouds. The family head's favorite son went to Dayo to celebrate the Empress's birthday. In the end, he was eaten by wild beasts and even his bones couldn't be found. This matter had already spread throughout Zhejiang prefecture. Some people said it was retribution, while others laughed at the fact that the Lian family could only swallow this loss. The Lian family was tyrannical in Zhejiang prefecture, but did he dare to seek revenge in Dayo? Revenge on who? If one were to talk about revenge, the target could only be Dayo's Qi Zixiao, the 7th most powerful expert in the world. After all, Lian Baoqing, that good-for-nothing, must have a screw loose in his head to see how beautiful the Empress of Dayo was. This result caused many people to rejoice in his misfortune. The Lian family had been too overbearing these past few years, and there were many people who didn't like them. Lian Qiji sat in the main hall and listened to the reports from his subordinates. The families of those people have been dealt with. Don't you think I'm cruel? Lian Qiji sighed. How could that be? After the death of the young master, that group of people actually dared to escape. If it wasn't for the fact that someone with a guilty conscience came back, I'm afraid the entire Lian family would still be in the dark, said the middle-aged man below. Lian Qiji knocked on the table with his fingers. Although that group of people ran away, they couldn't run away. He had already sent people to investigate. He had to catch all of them and wouldn't let them die a quick death. As for their family members in Zhejiang prefecture, he had already sent them on their way. But he still couldn't swallow this anger in his heart. His son and Tong Tong were eaten by wild beasts? His son had no sense of propriety, but did Tong Tong also have no sense of propriety? Qi Zixiao had gone too far. He couldn't afford to offend Qi Zixiao, but there was another person he could take revenge on. You killed my son, I'll kill your pretty boy. Over the past few days, as the news spread, the news that Qi Zixiao had found a pretty boy who only knew how to flatter her had spread like wildfire. At the same time, there was also a sentence that spread. If the heavens did not give birth to His Majesty, the ages would be like a long night. It was said that the pretty boy won Qi Zixiao's heart because of this sentence. This news didn't shock the world, but at least some well-informed people were shocked. Many people were envious of that pretty boy. Not only was Qi Zixiao the Empress of Dayo, but she was also extremely talented and the 7th most powerful expert in the world. To be fancied by such a woman, that brat must have accumulated several lifetimes of good fortune. The True Tao sect was a small sect that not many people knew about 10 years ago. 10 years ago, a person rose to prominence and became known to the whole world. Senior sister, that Qi Zixiao is really arrogant. He even dared to accept such words. He really doesn't care about the heroes of the world. A 16 or 17-year-old girl in the audience who was dressed like a Taoist nun wrinkled her nose and said angrily. In front of her was a peerlessly beautiful woman who was also dressed like a Taoist nun. She wore a tall crown on her head and a headband on her forehead. At this moment, the woman was looking at him with a smile. Senior sister, you're always like this. You don't care about anything, the young girl said angrily. That's all there is to the world. What's there to fight about? The woman smiled. You're the third most powerful expert in the world. If I were as capable as you, I would have taught her a lesson long ago. She's merely the seventh most powerful expert in the world, yet she's so arrogant. I'm angry for you, but why aren't you reacting at all? The young girl said angrily as she slammed the table. If you weren't so impatient, you would definitely be much stronger than you are now. Have you done your homework today? The woman's smile was calm and full of indifference and modesty. Anyone who saw her would know that she was the third most powerful expert in the world, Li Yuanzhu. The young girl was so angry that she snorted twice. After a while, she hung her head dejectedly. You're almost like a statue of a god. After a short while, she rolled her eyes and was overjoyed. I heard that Qi Zixiao found a pretty boy who doesn't know any martial arts and only knows how to flatter. It's so ridiculous that he was actually tricked by just one sentence. Even I wouldn't be that stupid. Li Yuanzhu smiled and looked at the young girl. After a while she said, that's not necessarily true. No one knew if she was saying that she wouldn't be that stupid or if she had other meanings. Ren Baqin naturally didn't know what his reputation had become after the departure of those people and the coming and going of the merchant caravans. Even if he knew, there was nothing he could do. In fact, not only did the outside world think so, but the entire imperial court and the ordinary aboriginal people also thought so. However, Her Majesty was insistent and extremely kind, so everyone had no choice but to accept it. After persevering in his training for the past few days, Ren Baqin felt that his physique seemed to have improved a lot. At the very least, it was harder for him to get tired, and his strength had also increased. Originally, he only had 120 kilograms of strength, but now, he had 135 kilograms of strength. In just a few days, his strength had increased so much, which surprised him quite a bit. The effect of the medicinal bath was actually so great. Previously, he didn't make much progress during his training, but these few days he had made rapid progress. It was no wonder that this martial art technique required supplementary medicine. Now he could even dive from 15 meters to 17 meters in the lake. Although he still couldn't see the bottom of the lake, this speed of progress made him happy. However, he didn't know how expensive the medicine he was using was. If it was given to ordinary Aboriginal people, perhaps 10 of them would be able to increase their strength by 20 kilograms. These few days he had also changed his training schedule to night time. After training he could immediately go to bed and rest. This way he wouldn't have to lie down and rest for half a day after training. On this day when he woke up, before he could even wash his face, he felt his surroundings suddenly change. From his room in Pingle Park, he had returned to the living room of his house on Earth. Originally he was still a little muddle-headed, but he instantly sobered up. Counting the time, it had been 5 days this time. Originally he transmigrated once every 3 days. Now he transmigrated once every 2.5 to 5 days. Furthermore, he could choose the time. Such a change made him very happy. At least, his degree of freedom had increased a lot. He could come back when he had free time. This way there wouldn't be any delays. After all, if it was like before, it was very easy for something to happen and he would suddenly be absent. After his joy, he noticed that there were a few bags placed at the side. These were all things that he had bought for the Empress previously, but he didn't bring them back. This time, when he returned, he just happened to bring them along, as well as the hot pot and various kinds of hot pot ingredients that the Empress couldn't forget. The beef and mutton in that world were much more delicious, and it couldn't be better to use in hot pot. Thinking about how he and the Empress could sit in Yangxin Palace Hall and eat hot pot, this kind of life seemed pretty good. It was a pity that he had to prepare to set off after he returned. He walked alone in the room. The Empress was here with him, and the scene of him cooking while the Empress sat on the sofa and watched television was still fresh in his mind. All of a sudden, Ren Baqin felt like buying this house and leaving that scene here forever. Chapter 153. The window and door on the second floor were still broken, and they hadn't been dealt with yet. They were only sealed with bedding. Previously, when the Empress was here, he didn't have time to deal with this matter. Now it was time to deal with it. Ren Baqin changed his clothes, considered for a while, and decided to erase all the surveillance data. Then he took out the hard drive and destroyed it, preparing to find a place to throw it into the river. Fortunately, his parents didn't call the police last time. Otherwise, these surveillance cameras would be in big trouble. At present, Ren Baqin was no longer in a hurry to investigate the reason for his transmigration. In any case, he couldn't find the reason now. He would see if he could find the reason after he became stronger. That day, the Empress suddenly appeared in front of him and pulled him back at the moment of his transmigration. It could be seen that someone as powerful as the Empress would be able to detect his transmigration. Once his strength reached that level, he might be able to sense it more clearly. He just didn't know if that day would come. He went out to apply for a new SIM card and then bought 2 mobile phones. The other one was prepared for the Empress. The next time she came to this world, it should be useful. Otherwise, it would be terrible if he lost her one day. In fact, on the 3rd day that the Empress was here, Rinpoche brought her to the shopping mall and went to the washroom. When he came out and realized that the Empress was gone, his heart almost stopped beating. Fortunately, it was just a false alarm. The Empress was in a shop nearby. However, this incident reminded him of something. If she came again in the future, Rinpoche couldn't possibly find a rope to tie the Empress around her waist. After setting up the SIM card and phone, Rinpoche gave his family a call. At least he still remembered his parents' phone number. He would use WeChat to contact Qin later. It did not matter if he could not find the others. After all, he did not have much contact with them. Hello, Dad. Sai, no matter what, Dad will support you no matter who you find. Although Rinpoche was speechless after listening to his father's words, he felt warmth in his heart. As long as you don't bring a man back. Pooh. Rinpoche spat out a mouthful of blood. It had already been half a month. Why was she still playing this joke? I just said it casually last time. Just don't let Mom rush me. That's why it's so scary, Dad muttered. Your father almost had a heart attack because of you. But that girl from last time, when are you going to bring her back to meet me? After Rinpoche informed his family that he was safe, the next step was to estimate the value of the jade talismans, jade pendants, and gemstones that he had brought back and find a place to sell them. Sitting in the car, he searched the internet on his phone for a long time before realizing that it was much more troublesome than he had imagined. Since he did not have a certificate of origin, large organizations and legitimate companies would not accept him. Some people had their own channels and did not need to consider this aspect, but in his hands, it was no different from holding stolen goods, except that there was no owner. Then there were some small companies, but it was hard to say how much these things would be worth if they were in front of them. After searching on the internet for a long time, he found all kinds of messy information, but not much of it was valuable. Rinpoche closed the webpage. After thinking about it, he was afraid that he would have to look for Qin. At the very least, with his status and connections, he might be able to find a way to help. He sent a message to Qin, and not long after, Qin gave him a call. Yo, 8,000-year-old didn't go to Wing together. Why did you think of me today? Where? Let's have lunch, Rinpoche said. The law firm has been very busy recently. They are working on a case. Let's meet downstairs at the law firm later. There is a restaurant that is not bad. Give me a call when you arrive. Rinpoche could hear the sound of typing coming from the other end of the phone. All right. An hour later, Rinpoche arrived at the law firm where Qin worked and gave him a call. 5 minutes later, he saw Qin jogging down the road, opening the car door and sitting in the front passenger seat. So busy recently? It's really rare to see young Master Qin like this. I can't help it. People who are getting married have to support their families. Rinpoche looked at him with disdain. His annual salary was not even enough to cover his monthly expenses. Don't you feel guilty for saying this? If you really want to support your family, you can just go back and take over your father's business. Why are you looking for me? Qin asked. Let's talk when we reach the restaurant. After a while, both of them sat in a private room of the restaurant. Rinpoche took out 2 red and 3 green gems from a cloth bag and placed them on the table. Help me see if there is any way to sell them. Where did you get them from? Are they stolen goods? Or did you rob tombs in the mountains a few days ago? Don't forget that I'm a lawyer. Qin looked at the gems on the table and was not in a hurry to look at them. Instead, he joked. Clean stuff. It's just that I can't tell you where I got them from, so I have to look for you. After hearing what he said, Qin held the gems in his hands and looked at them carefully. The 2 rubies were the size of a thumbnail. Furthermore, it was obvious that they had been polished. The color was deep red like a ball of flame. Looking at them against the sunlight, the interior was extremely clean. There were only a few cracks on the edges. The 2 rubies were about the same size and their purity was also very close. As for the emerald, it was emitting a deep green color. Its purity was also very good, but it was slightly inferior to the 2 rubies. I don't really understand these things, but I have seen a few of them in the past. The price of these gems should not be low. I can help you contact someone to sell them, but I can't tell you the source. The other party might want to lower the price, Qin said as he placed the gems in front of Rinpoche. Understood. Ren Baqin nodded. He didn't even think about selling them at the market price. As long as he could sell them at a similar price, it would be fine. Chen Qing saw that Ren Baqin understood, and that made things easier. He made a phone call and chatted for a while. Then he said, "Fatty Su, one of my brothers has a few gems that he wants to sell. Come over and take a look." After that, he told Ren Baqin the address and hung up the phone. "Keep them first. We will talk about it when Fatty Su is here," Chen Qing said to Ren Baqin. While the two of them were waiting, Chen Qing hesitated for a while and said to Ren Baqin, "I saw you with a woman the last time." Ren Baqin immediately looked at him from the corner of his eyes. "Don't tell me you are waiting for me to go out in the neighborhood? That's not important." Chen Qing waved his hand and said to him seriously, "That woman is indeed beautiful. Her family background should not be ordinary. With one look, I can tell that she is not someone that can be raised by a small family. Not to mention a small family, even an ordinary official's family would not be able to raise her. Only those big shots can. You can be considered to be successful. Let's not talk about other things. When the medicine hits the market, you will definitely be worth hundreds of millions. But in the eyes of some people, you are no different from an ordinary person. What I mean by this is that in our country, people of equal social status are still very important. Your status is too different from hers. You might be fated to be together for a period of time, but don't fall too deeply into it." "Thank you," Ren Baqin said. Although Chen Qing's words were not pleasant to hear, for him to say these words to Ren Baqin meant that he really treated Ren Baqin as a friend. Ren Baqin had to admit that Chen Qing's eyes were indeed very sharp. He could actually see so much just by looking at Ren Baqin from afar. Chapter 154. The fatty Su that Chen Qing mentioned did not make the two of them wait for too long. He was about 25 or 26 years old and wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. He looked refined if not for his physique. His initial estimate was that he was at least 100 kilograms. His muscles trembled with every step he took. Hello. You must be young Master Chen's friend. You can just call me Fatty Su." Fatty Su took off his glasses and scanned the room. Then he shook hands with Ren Baqin and said, "I'm Ren Baqin." Ren Baqin introduced himself. "Oh, 8,000 years old? In ancient times you would be a prince. You're amazing." Fatty Su laughed out loud. He was tactful and enthusiastic but not annoying. Ren Baqin's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He might really become a prince consort. Who did father get to come up with the name? Taizi, it's rare for you to think of me when something good happens. Fatty Su patted Chen Qing's shoulder and sat down on a chair. Soon after, he seemed to feel a little uncomfortable and pulled another chair together. Only then did he sit down steadily and began to wipe the mist off his spectacles. "Isn't it a good thing that I'm married? When the time comes, I'll definitely ask you to send a gift." Chen Qing also laughed. "This is necessary. Have you decided on a date?" Ren Baqin turned around and asked Chen Qing. Previously, it was the engagement banquet. He was not sure if Chen Qing and Jiang Nan were engaged for the wedding banquet. "May 1st next year. Even if you didn't ask me, I would have informed you by then," Chen Qing said. After chatting for a while, Chen Qing said to Fatty Su, "This brother of mine has something to sell. It's clean but there aren't any procedures. Take a look. If you can accept it, then accept it. If you can't, then find a way. We're brothers, don't act like you're trying to fool an outsider." "Don't worry. It won't be a problem. Let's make friends." Fatty Su immediately patted his chest. His family owns the Suji Jewelry Company. They are very knowledgeable about this industry, Chen Qing explained. Shuji Jewelry was one of the largest jewelry stores in the city. There were 6 stores in the city alone, and there were also stores in the surrounding provinces and cities. It could be considered to be quite famous. Ren Baqin placed a few gemstones on the round table and said, "Sorry to trouble you." Fatty Su turned the table, and a few gemstones appeared in front of him. Then he took out a white cloth, tweezers, gloves, magnifying glass and a filter from his bag and placed them on the table one by one. After that, he put on the gloves and placed the gemstones on the white cloth one by one, carefully examining them. While he was inspecting the items, Ren Baqin and Chen Qing were waiting there. Ren Baqin did not know what the items that he had brought back were like. Even though the items that could be given to the Empress would not be bad, after all, the other world was still somewhat different from this world. He wouldn't be surprised if something went wrong. During the examination, Fatty Su had a serious expression on his face. He did not utter a single word. After a long time, he finally placed the 5 gemstones back onto the cloth. After taking off his gloves, he wiped off his sweat and smiled at the two of them. There shouldn't be any problems with these gemstones. Furthermore, they are natural and did not undergo heat treatment. However, I still need to take it back and re-examine it. After all, the things I brought with me are quite simple and crude. Brother Rin wants to make a move, right? Is it clean? It's very clean. It was passed down by an old man. There's nothing wrong with it. It would be best if that's the case, Fatty Su said while wiping the sweat off his forehead. Brother Rin, if you want to send it to an auction house, I can help you with the appraisal procedures. If you want to cash it, the price might be lower than the market price. After all, with such a large flow of funds, I can't possibly do you a favor or I won't be able to explain myself, Fatty Su continued. Cash it. Alright then, I'll go back and examine it further before deciding. Fatty, don't you have any idea what's going on? Qin Qing asked. Even though these two rubies aren't pigeon blood, they are still deep red in color and have a very high purity. Most importantly, they are natural and have not been heated. As for these 3 rubies, they are emeralds. The color and luster are also pretty good. If I didn't make a mistake, a conservative estimate of the value of these items is more than 20 million yuan. I still need to re-examine them before I can be sure. It's not that I don't trust you, Brother Rin. It's just that it's really hard to predict when it comes to gemstones. It's hard to avoid misjudging them. A slight difference in quality is a huge difference, Fatty Su laughed mischievously. Ren Baqin kept the gemstones. Following which, the 3 of them ate and chatted. Fatty Su didn't ask Ren Baqin about the origin of these gemstones. He had already made it clear previously, so there was no need to ask again. During the meal, Qin Qing took the initiative to bring up the matter regarding the pharmaceutical laboratory. Now that the laboratory equipment and personnel had arrived and those seeds were being cultivated, all that was left was to wait and see how long it would take for the results to be produced. At this moment, Qin Qing brought up this matter. On one hand, Ren Baqin had been elusive lately. On the other hand, he wanted to let Fatty Su know. Being able to do business with Qin Qing's family would at least make Fatty Su think highly of him. This would also save Ren Baqin a lot of trouble. After the meal, Ren Baqin sent Qin Qing back to the law firm. After which, he and Fatty Su went to the largest jewelry store in the city, Suji Jewelry. After sending the gemstones in for an entire afternoon, they finally waited for the results of the final examination. Fatty Su looked at the report in his hands and said to Ren Baqin, Brother Ren, if these items were to be sent to the auction house, they should be worth more than 30 million yuan. The highest price would be 33 million yuan. If there are 2 people who are interested in them at the same time, the bidding price might be even higher. However, I can only offer 25 million yuan. This is already the best I can do. After all, there are still a lot of things to do. These items need to be sent to a bigger auction house, and I'm afraid it will take a few months. With such a huge amount of money, there has to be an explanation. Alright, thank you. Ren Baqin nodded his head slightly. It was much better than what he had expected. Even though it seemed like Fatty Su had made a lot of money, if he were to find a random place to sell them, it was possible that someone would offer him 3 million yuan. Next, it was time to sign the agreement. When Ren Baqin left, there was already an additional 25 million yuan in his bank account. As for the few pieces of jade pendants and talismans, Ren Baqin took them out to let Fatty Su take a look. The jade was good, but it didn't have much historical value. The price was also not high. It was about a few million yuan. If it was in the past, it would be a huge sum of money. However, with 25 million yuan in his bank account, there was no need to rush to sell it. After Ren Baqin went out, he first transferred 2 million yuan to his family. Within half an hour, he received a call from his family. The 2 million yuan shocked his parents. Why did you transfer so much money to your family? The company has been doing well recently and I have some spare cash on hand. Use this money to buy a house for Wan Yin and a car for Dad, Ren Baqin said with a smile. Hearing this, even though his parents were grumbling, they were happy that their son had grown up. After hanging up the phone, Ren Baqin looked for a skewer shop. He hadn't had skewers for a long time and was craving for food. During this period, he was also thinking about what he should do in the future. His top priority was still the iron or steel making and forging. If he wanted to open a mine, it would be best for him to get some explosives. Those things would definitely increase the mining speed immediately. Otherwise, he would just have to rely on those open-pit mines and use pickaxes to dig for metal ores. The mining speed would definitely not be fast. No matter what, it was definitely a good idea to prepare some explosives first. He reckoned that the aboriginals who had never seen gunpowder before would definitely be pleasantly surprised. Chapter 155. The next day Rinpoche once again went to the place where he bought the gun. He asked for Qin Qing's phone number again. Just like before, they were blindfolded and brought in. "I want a rifle and mine explosives." After Rinpoche took off his hood, he saw the burly man from before and immediately said, "You want to rob a bank?" The burly man asked in surprise. "If we want to go up the mountain, we might have to dig a hole. I need mining explosives that are easy to operate, stable and powerful," Rinpoche said directly. "It's too risky to sell this to you," the big man said, staring at him. Previously he didn't think much of it. However, if explosives were used, coupled with what Rinpoche said about digging holes, it immediately reminded him of a profession, grave robbers. Rinpoche couldn't help but laugh bitterly. He was the true good citizen, okay? You can pay more and you don't have to worry about the risk if you use it deep in the mountains. I'm even more careful than you in this regard. After all, I'm not someone who lacks money. This time, I need to go into the mountains for something, and I might need to use explosives in some places. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked for mine explosives. It would be a waste if he went in because of certain things. Rinpoche's words finally moved the other party. Those who could find their way here were all young masters and not those hooligans on the streets. "How many mine explosives do you need?" 100 kilograms, Rinpoche replied straightforwardly. The burly man pondered for a while. Mining explosives were too cheap. 1 ton only cost 3,000 yuan. Even if Rinpoche increased the price, how much could they sell for? Therefore he looked up at Rinpoche and asked, "How about TNT? 20 kilograms is enough. It's more stable, less prone to problems, and it's easier to carry." Rinpoche was a little surprised at the boldness of this burly man. Previously, when Rinpoche wanted to buy mining explosives, he was still hesitant. In the end, he even dared to sell TNT. After all, this was China, not some foreign country. At the thought of going abroad, Rinpoche also felt that if he needed weapons and explosives again, it would be better to do so overseas. It was simply too easy for something to go wrong at home. "Sure, I want 40 kilograms. It's best if it's made into a detonator that can be ignited and detonated." Rinpoche nodded. Previously, he only asked for 100 kilograms of explosives because he wanted to bring only 60 kilograms to Dayo at a time. However, he was afraid that it would not be enough, so he prepared to bring it twice. It was still very dangerous to leave this thing at home. If TNT was used to transport it all at once and it was more powerful, that would be the best. After the other party nodded his head, Rinpoche picked a Type 81 rifle. This type of classic rifle, which imitated the AK, had always been the most popular rifle in the country. The 7.62mm bullet could be fired at twice the speed of a handgun. Its penetrating power was much better than that of a handgun. With 30 bullets in a magazine, Rinpoche felt that he could seriously injure the saber-toothed tiger that he saw previously with this gun. If Rinpoche were to encounter a practitioner like Tong Tong who had just attained the earth wheel level, Rinpoche would be able to shoot a shuttle at him. He definitely wouldn't be able to dodge or block it. 1 gun, 3 magazines and 500 bullets. After paying, Rinpoche was sent back to the car along with the bag containing the guns. As for the TNT explosives, they would not be traded at the other party's place. Instead, they would inform him of the location in 2 days and he would go there directly to pick them up. The money had already been paid together with the gun. For the next few days, while waiting for the explosives, Rinpoche pondered whether he should look for a place abroad. At the very least, it would be more convenient for him to buy weapons and explosives. On the 4th day, Rinpoche obtained the explosives without any delay. He immediately carried 2 big bags back to Pingle Park. This time around he brought back the TNT explosives. Even though he could wait until he reached the mine to collect them, he didn't dare to leave them at home. In addition, there was that Type 81 rifle, bullets, magazines, the Empress's hot pot, base ingredients, dipping sauces, a pair of shoes that the Empress liked very much, and a small amount of candy. Rinpoche looked at the familiar surrounding scenery. He first put down the things, opened the window and looked at the sky outside. It was only evening. Then he carried the hot pot and the pair of shoes to meet the Empress. After waiting outside Yangshin Palace Hall for a while, Rinpoche entered. The Empress was still on the couch drinking wine in boredom. Rinpoche suddenly felt that he should really bring her a laptop to watch movies and animations. However, if he were to nurture the Empress into a 2D expert, he reckoned that he would be committing a grave sin. After thinking about it, it was better to abandon this thought. "Your Majesty, I'm back." As Rinpoche spoke, he went forward and opened the bag, revealing the hot pot inside. When the Empress saw the hot pot, a trace of a smile appeared on her cold face. "Not bad." She turned her head and said to Qing Yuan, "Inform the imperial kitchen that there's no need to prepare dinner. Just cut some thin slices of meat and vegetables, a little of each. Also bring some charcoal in a container." Qing Yuan nodded her head in response. When she went out she was rather curious. What was Her Majesty going to do? After which, the table was brought over and a metal plate was placed on the table. Ren Baqin then placed the copper hot pot on it. At the same time he took out the base ingredients and poured some water on it. After that, everything was ready. All that was left was the meat and charcoal. Seeing that Ren Baqin was busy, the Empress opened her mouth and said, "Are we going to set off this time?" "Yes, we can set off tomorrow. After all, this is an important matter," Ren Baqin said. The Empress nodded her head. It was indeed time to set off. By now the recruitment orders should have already reached the mountains. 3 months was enough to recruit 20,000 soldiers. Even though the training still needed some time, the weapons couldn't be delayed at all. After a while, Qing Yuan and the people from the imperial kitchen brought all kinds of things over. The Empress then waved her hand to dismiss Qing Yuan and Hong Luan. After the two of them left, the Empress rested her chin on one hand and looked at Ren Baqin busying himself. She was somewhat happy. This Yangshin Palace Hall wasn't that deserted anymore. After a while, the water in the hot pot began to boil. Ren Baqin first placed the meat slices in the hot pot. Just as he was about to raise his head and tell the Empress that it was time to eat, he happened to see a pair of clear and bright eyes. "Your Majesty, it's time to eat," Ren Baqin said softly. At this moment, the two of them were sitting opposite each other in the huge Yangshin Palace Hall. The copper hot pot was constantly emitting hot steam and the meat slices were rolling in it. "Pour some wine for me." After Ren Baqin was done, the Empress said, "Fill it up for yourself as well." After which, the Empress raised her wine cup and said, "I hope everything goes smoothly for you." "Thank you, Your Majesty," Ren Baqin said as he drank the wine in one gulp. He filled up both of their wine cups. The Empress said again, "I will send a group of people to accompany you. You have to take care of yourself." Ren Baqin felt warmth in his heart after hearing the Empress's concern. It seemed that after the trip to Earth, the Empress had indeed changed a lot. At the very least, when the two of them were facing each other, the Empress looked more feminine. It was as if a layer of ice-cold armor had been removed. This kind of change made him feel happy. The two of them ate the hot pot for about 2 hours. Occasionally, they would exchange a few words and drink a mouthful of wine. At other times, they would just stare at the meat slices rolling in the hot pot. They didn't need to talk much. Just by sitting opposite each other and looking at each other, they felt happy in their hearts. Chapter 156. The next day, Ren Baqin woke up, washed up, and started to pack his things. After he was done preparing, he went to see the Empress. This time, the place wasn't Yangshin Palace Hall but the throne room. This was his first time here. When he arrived, the Empress was sitting on the highest golden chair. There were already a few people standing below her. "Greetings, Your Majesty." After Ren Baqin greeted them, he stood obediently at the side and sized up the rest of them. One of them was a burly man wearing iron armor and holding a helmet with a feather on it. His skin was bronze in color and he looked to be in his 30s. He was a rank 6 military official. There were 2 other people. One of them was in his 40s and had a big beard. He was looking at Ren Baqin from head to toe. There was another person who looked to be in his 30s or 40s. Compared to the aboriginals, he was slightly skinny, but compared to Ren Baqin, he was considered a burly man. The former was the official robe of the 3rd rank, while the latter was the official robe of the 5th rank. "Ren Baqin." The Empress's cold voice came from above. "I'm here." Ren Baqin promptly took a few steps forward and faced the Empress. Storyteller Ren Baqin of Qingshin Palace Hall is rather talented and devoted to his duty. He was promoted to the position of Imperial Deputy Prefect. "I'll take up the post immediately." Ren Baqin was stunned at first. Then he knelt on one knee and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." He was a little stunned. He had only been here for less than 2 minutes and he was already promoted. Furthermore, it was a Deputy Imperial Deputy Prefect who was directly promoted from minor 8th rank to minor 5th rank. This speed was faster than riding a rocket. It had been less than 3 months since Ren Baqin arrived in this world, but he had already walked the path that others would take a lifetime to walk. It was very difficult for ordinary officials and generals to be promoted so quickly, no matter how great their contributions were. However, the other 3 were not surprised. After all, everyone knew his identity. If there were no accidents, he would become a prince in the future. His current official position was just a transition. Moreover, His Majesty had promoted him to Imperial Deputy Prefect, which meant that he was in charge of the affairs of the palace, which was different from the duties of the 6 ministries of the Imperial Court and the military. This time around, Imperial Deputy Prefect Ren Baqin will be in charge, and Tao Jiyuan will be assisting him. They will patrol Mount Damo and Mount Liutsue and think of ways to increase the production of iron ore. If there are results, we will definitely reward you generously. Yes, Your Majesty. Ren Baqin and Tao Jiyuan bowed and complied. After hearing these words, Ren Baqin knew why the Empress wanted to promote him. If he were to be in charge of the iron mine, his position as a secondary class 8th rank officer would be too low. He would be promoted to the secondary 5th rank, the same rank as the Ordnance Department's director. Coupled with his special status, it would be more appropriate for him to be in charge. Guard Tengji of the Yiwei School, bring 300 winged cavalry warriors with you to protect them along the way. If anything happens, you will be held responsible, the Empress said coldly. The armored general immediately complied. He naturally knew who the Empress wanted him to protect. If both of them were to encounter danger at the same time, Ren Baqin was afraid that he would have to bring Deputy Prefect Ren back. Otherwise, he would really have to raise his head to see the world. Go back and prepare. We will set off after noon. Ren Baqin, stay behind. After the Empress finished speaking, Tao Jiyuan and Tengji left one after another. This is Feng Ho from the Ordnance Department. I have something to ask you. Greetings, Chief of the Department of Ordnance. Ren Baqin turned around and cupped his hands. Deputy Prefect Ren, I would like to ask if you have any confidence in expanding the production of iron ore? Feng Ho turned around and looked at Ren Baqin. That depends on the iron ore content and distribution. If it's just mining, there should be a way, Ren Baqin said after thinking for a while. I heard from Her Majesty that Deputy Prefect Ren has a way to smelt iron ore and forge weapons? I wonder if you can tell me so that I can be prepared, Feng Ho asked again. The main problems in smelting iron ore are insufficient temperature and unstable temperature. The simple method is to use bellows. However, for a long period of time, we will need a steel-making furnace to continuously smelt steel. This process is very simple, the equipment requirements are low, and the stability is high. If the produced steel has low carbon content and fewer impurities, it can be forged directly. This saves a lot of manpower compared to forging by hand, Ren Baqin explained. What is bellows? What is a steel-making furnace? What is steel? Feng Ho frowned and asked 3 questions in a row. With regards to this husband chosen by Her Majesty, he had the same opinion as everyone else in the imperial court. They all looked down on him. Otherwise, everyone wouldn't have objected to it back then. On one hand, he was too weak. On the other hand, other than bootlicking, he didn't seem to have any other abilities. This morning, Her Majesty summoned them over and said a few things. Her Majesty wanted to increase the production of iron ore. Not only Her Majesty, but the entire Ministry of Works had also racked their brains but still couldn't come up with a good solution. The 2 iron mountains were simply too difficult to mine. For so many years they had been mining slowly like this. Countless people racked their brains to no avail. Everyone felt that this was the only way. This time, Her Majesty let Ren Baqin take charge and patrol the mines to find a solution. If that was the case, Ren Baqin wouldn't say anything and let him do it. In any case, the Department of Military Arms would benefit from it and it didn't matter if it didn't succeed. However, from what Her Majesty said, Ren Baqin was going to intervene in the smelting and forging of weapons. In that case, Ren Baqin couldn't just let him do it. If Ren Baqin intervened, what could he do as the head of the Department of Military Arms? Furthermore, did Ren Baqin really know how to mine, smelt, and forge weapons? If Ren Baqin was really capable, everyone in the Department of Military Arms would listen to him. Otherwise, Feng Ho wouldn't allow Ren Baqin to intervene in the Department of Military Arms. Therefore, he suggested to ask storyteller Ren. Ren Baqin didn't mind. Instead, he explained in detail, you can try the bellows. It's a big box with a handle and a pushboard on one side and an air inlet. Then, a person will push and pull from one side to send air through. The air is full of oxygen and with enough oxygen the fire will burn better. Furthermore, if someone keeps pushing and pulling, the fire will be more stable and the temperature will be higher, making it easier to smelt. Ren Baqin roughly explained. As for the steel-making furnace, first of all, what is steel? If ordinary iron is used to forge weapons, it will be very brittle. Therefore, it needs to be forged to remove the impurities and reduce the carbon content. In the end, the result is actually steel. The steel-making furnace directly removes the impurities during the smelting process, reducing the carbon content and directly smelting the steel. This way you can at least save the time and effort of hammering and forging. Ren Baqin explained. Feng Ho frowned as he didn't understand. The things that Ren Baqin said made him feel that it was awesome even though he didn't understand it. He had been in the Department of Military Arms for more than 10 years. Even if he didn't say that he was proficient, he still had a rough idea of what was going on. However, he actually didn't understand what Ren Baqin was talking about. The Empress looked at Feng Ho, who was frowning and thinking hard, and the corners of her mouth curled up. This was what she wanted to see. Naturally, she was clear about the thoughts of everyone in the imperial court. Her husband was chosen by herself, and it wasn't up to others to interrupt. But to be looked down upon like this, she was more or less unhappy. Chapter 157. In the afternoon, Ren Baqin walked out of the palace wearing the official uniform of the imperial deputy prefect. There were already 2 carriages waiting outside the square. Both were pulled by crooked cows, but their appearances were very different. One was from the palace and it was pulled by 2 crooked oxen. The carriage was completely made of wood, and it gave off a wooden fragrance. The coachman was an old man with short white hair and a square face. He looked very solemn. The other carriage belonged to Tao Jiyuan. It was also pulled by 2 crooked cows, but the carriage was slightly smaller. Behind the 2 carriages, there were 4 rows of cavalrymen in leather armor. They didn't wear helmets and only had a feather on their shoulders. This was the most elite army under the Empress, the winged cavalry. There were only 1,500 of them, but the weakest among them was no weaker than an earth rank expert in Great Xia. Those who had just attained the earth wheel level could hold a military position below rank 7 in Great Xia. The same strength could also hold a military position below rank 9 in Dayo. However, they were just ordinary cavalrymen in the winged cavalry. These winged cavalry were riding on huge goats. These animals ran very fast and were especially good at jumping. They were comparable to the mountain-gazing birds when it came to climbing mountains, but it was a little more bumpy. The reason why they chose this kind of mount instead of the mountain-gazing birds was probably because these cavalrymen were huge and their weapons were too heavy. On the other hand, when a large number of mountain-gazing birds gathered together, the smell was really hard to resist. Thank you very much. Ren Baqin waited for the imperial guard behind him to put his luggage in the carriage before cupping his hands and thanking him. This imperial guard was also very familiar with him. He and another imperial guard were usually at the entrance of Pingle Park. Today he was on duty. That imperial guard grinned widely, cupped his hands at Ren Baqin and returned to the palace. Deputy Prefect Ren. Tao Jiyuan came down from the carriage and greeted him. In the morning he didn't look at Ren Baqin carefully. At this moment he carefully scanned Ren Baqin from top to bottom and didn't see anything special. However, when Sir Feng returned just now, he actually asked him to listen to Ren Baqin's arrangements. This made him feel astonished. He really wanted to know what they talked about in the palace after he left. It was a pity that Feng Ho kept this matter to himself. He couldn't possibly say that he didn't understand what Ren Baqin said, right? Looking at Ren Baqin's confident look and those words that he didn't understand, Feng Ho wavered a little. He didn't know if Ren Baqin really understood these things. At this moment, the Empress opened her mouth and said, "In that case, let's leave it at that for now. We will know when the time comes." Seeing this, Feng Ho swallowed all the words he wanted to say and waited to see how Ren Baqin's trip to the iron mine was going. Deputy Prefect Ren, may I ask if we are setting off? Teng Ji dismounted from his mount, took a few steps forward and asked. Thank you for your hard work, Captain. Let's go, Ren Baqin said. At the same time he looked back at the tightly shut palace gates before turning around and getting into the carriage. The carriage pulled by the 2 crooked oxen wasn't big, only about 1.6 meters. If one wanted to lie down, one would have to stretch one's feet out. The floor inside was covered with a layer of fur, and there was a small table on the side for placing drinks or fruits. However, the carriages at this time had wooden wheels and were very bumpy. They could only store alcohol in the city, but once they were out of the city, there was no need to think about it. Ren Baqin sat cross-legged in the carriage, leaned against the wall, lifted the curtain and looked outside. Following that, Teng Ji gave the order, "Move out." Everyone turned their mounts around, and the oxen carriage moved forward slowly. When they were out of the city, the speed of the carriage increased. Rinpoche looked at the scenery outside along the way and felt the tremors of the carriage. He could even feel a small stone being pushed over. Fortunately, the fur cushion under his body played a big role. However, even so, he couldn't sit still after 4 hours. He lifted the curtain and squeezed to the side of the coachman, feeling the wind and dust on his face. After a while, he returned to the carriage with a mouthful of dust. Long-distance travel in this world is simply torture. Rinpoche heaved a deep sigh and continued to lift the curtain to look outside. There weren't many sceneries to see in this world. There were only mountains, rivers, fields, and occasionally, animals that were startled by the roadside. In the beginning it was still somewhat refreshing to look at, but after a long time, it became boring. Now, he somewhat regretted that he didn't bring his e-book along. At least he had something to pass the time. At the same time, a thought emerged in his mind. If he were to return to Earth in the carriage, where would he be when he reappeared? Or would he be in the carriage? Or would he be at the place where he disappeared? The journey this time around would take 5 days. He really wanted to give it a try. Unfortunately, if he disappeared, he reckoned that he would be discovered in less than half a day. Rinpoche lifted the curtain and asked the coachman, "How much longer before we can rest?" "Sir Deputy Prefect, there is a village in front." The coachman looked very familiar and directly replied. Rinpoche nodded his head and surveyed the surroundings. At this moment, it was already dark and he couldn't see anything. He could only hear the howls of wild beasts in the night sky from time to time. After another hour, the horseman in front slowed down and eventually came to a complete stop. Tengji turned to the side of Rinpoche and Tao Jiyuan's carriage and shouted, "Sir, Loya village is in front. Please wait for a moment and wait to inform the village chief." After a while, the horseman in front returned and the group continued to slow down. Rinpoche had never seen a village in this world, so he lifted the curtain and sat beside the coachman. The village wasn't too big. After standing for a distance, he could see a circle of wooden fences in front. It was probably to prevent wild beasts from entering. Therefore, even though it was called a village, it was more like a stockade. Rinpoche guessed that the Aboriginals used to live like this when they were in the mountains, and some of them still maintain this habit after they left the mountains. After a long time, this tradition was passed down. Rinpoche asked the coachman, and the truth was exactly as he thought. If there were no attacks from wild beasts, perhaps after a few decades or hundreds of years as the village expanded, these wooden fences would also disappear. As the group entered the village, the entire appearance of the village was revealed in front of Rinpoche. Most of the buildings were made of wood, and the bottom of the buildings were supported by wooden stakes that were at least 20 centimeters in diameter. They were about half a meter tall and were completely used to prevent rainwater and some snakes and insects. There was a fishy smell in the village. Many of the houses had animal skins and dried wild vegetables that were being hung to dry. As a result, the smell was very strong. When they realized that the army had entered the villagers weren't afraid at all. They walked out of their houses and waved to the crowd with a smile. Most of their clothes were animal skins, revealing their bronze skin. The smiles on their faces were very simple and full of enthusiasm. However, when they saw Rinpoche sitting in the carriage, they curiously sized him up. After all, with one look, they could tell that he wasn't an Aboriginal. The relationship between the Aboriginal army and the commoners is very good. Rinpoche immediately had this thought. The village was almost circular in shape. In the middle was a circular open space. There were many things like stone locks. Presumably, these were used by the villagers to hone their bodies when they had nothing to do. At the side, there was also a wooden shelf with some wooden sticks on it. From this village, one could see how much the Aboriginals valued martial arts. The residences were built around this open space and were divided into 2 levels. There were about 100 households in one sweep, and the entire village had about 200 to 300 people. At this moment, every household had lit up their oil lamps. Some people came out to greet them while others leaned against the window and looked outside. Rinpoche got down from the carriage and stretched his body. This day's journey was really too torturous. At this moment he could finally relax. Tao Jiyuan also jumped down from the carriage at the side. However, he looked much better than Rinpoche and didn't seem to be tired. "Sirs, this is the village chief. The biggest house belongs to the village chief. Tonight, the 2 sirs will be resting at the village chief's house." Tengji brought an old man over. "Greetings to the 2 sirs. Thank you for your trouble." Rinpoche cupped his hands and said. On the other hand, Tao Jiyuan nodded his head. After staying at the village chief's house for a night, Rinpoche endured the buzzing sound of the mosquitoes. The next morning he yawned and went straight into the carriage. He swore in his heart that he would rather stay in the carriage next time. He didn't know if it was because of those animal skins that were drying outside that attracted so many mosquitoes. Furthermore, they only bit him. At least when he asked Tao Jiyuan in the morning, he didn't get bitten by the mosquitoes. Even these mosquitoes knew how to bully the weak and fear the strong. Chapter 158. But with so many people waiting for me, I have to write. My friends are waiting for me. Chapter 159. After 4 bumpy days on the road, Rinpoche saw many things along the way. What surprised him the most was that every time they stopped at a village, the winged cavalry warriors would teach the children martial arts in the morning. Even though it wasn't much, a little bit of guidance was already very valuable to these children as it could help them avoid many detours. The Aboriginals spared no effort in this aspect, as well as the relationship between the army and the commoners, made Rinpoche feel sentimental. This was rarely seen in history. Other than a few armies such as the current dynasty, most of the time the commoners viewed the army as tigers and wolves. A few days later, when they arrived at a small city, Rinpoche suggested resting for a day. Even though the others were a little dissatisfied with this request, they didn't say much. After all, Rinpoche's identity was special. Rinpoche told the others not to disturb him and to place the food at the door before returning to Earth. The long and arduous journey these few days had indeed made him unbearably tired and he needed a good rest. Even though it was a little pretentious, it was worth a try. After all, he was just an ordinary person. Even after arriving in Dayo, he didn't suffer much. The toughest time was probably the night of the Great Hunt. That time, he was more mentally tense and couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as the fatigue he felt this time. Even if he didn't talk about these, it was time. Finding a place to stay now was better than suddenly disappearing tomorrow. After Rinpoche returned, he immediately threw himself onto the bed. It was soft, quiet, and the bed wasn't bumpy at all. It was simply too comfortable. After sleeping for 4 to 5 hours, Rinpoche woke up. He was also unwilling to move and tossed and turned on the bed. After a long time, he finally got out of bed and made himself a cup of instant noodles. After staying at home for 3 days, Rinpoche once again returned to that world. It was midnight. After lying on the bed for a few hours, he heard a knock on the door. "Sir Deputy Prefect." "Come in." Rinpoche sat up from the bed. "Sir Deputy Prefect, it's time to set off." The person who entered was Tingji. After seeing Rinpoche, he finally felt relieved. On this day, Rinpoche didn't make a single sound in the room. The food at the door was also left untouched, which made him feel uneasy. If Rinpoche hadn't informed him in advance, he would have barged in. "All right, I got it." Rinpoche nodded his head, got out of bed, and washed up. An hour later, he returned to the carriage and continued his journey. Mount Damo was one of the 2 iron mines in Dayo, and it was filled with all kinds of prisoners. Most of them were soldiers from other countries who were captured during the border conflicts between Dayo and the other countries. Currently, there were close to 1,000 of them, and some of them were even at the intermediate level of the manual level. However, after being shackled here, they didn't even have the chance to escape. Although the mine was filled with young and strong warriors, the mining progress was still very slow. Even if they used human lives to fill in the gaps, it would be of no use. The rocks in the mine were like refined iron. A single strike would cause a series of sparks, and at most, a white dot would appear on the surface of the rock. There was a team of 300 people guarding this place, and the weakest among them was equivalent to low-level man rank. Dayo's less than 60,000 soldiers were stationed at the border, and the 3 nations didn't dare to invade lightly. This was because of their formidable individual strength. Even though the 60,000 soldiers who were above the man rank were divided into 3 directions and facing 3 nations, they were relying on the Aboriginal soldiers who were at least at the man rank. This was the foundation of Dayo. On this day, a carriage slowly approached the foot of Mount Damo and stopped at the foot of the mountain. "Who are you?" The guard at the entrance of the mine took 2 steps forward and asked. This was a location in the depths of Dayo. Furthermore, the person who came was also an Aboriginal. As such, they didn't have any vigilance. "Ask your commanding officer to come out." "This is Her Majesty's warrant," Tingji said in a deep voice from his mount. While waiting, Rinpoche and Tao Jiyuan alighted from the carriage. They took advantage of this time to stretch their bodies. After 2 days of sitting in the carriage, their bodies were rusting to death. Even though Ren Baqin had rested on Earth for 3 days, seeing that Tao Jiyuan's condition was actually better than his, he couldn't help but admire the physique of the aboriginals. These few days Ren Baqin and Tao Jiyuan had become more familiar with each other. After all, they could still chat along the way. On the 3rd day of their journey, Ren Baqin and Tao Jiyuan traveled together in the same carriage and chatted a lot. After chatting with Tao Jiyuan, Ren Baqin discovered that not only was Tao Jiyuan literate, but he had also learned a lot of knowledge in various aspects. He could be considered a rare talent among the aboriginals. After chatting for a while, Ren Baqin found out that Tao Jiyuan's family had produced a few generations of high officials among the aboriginals. They had collected quite a lot of books from other nations. 500 volumes was considered a rather rich collection among the aboriginals. Tao Jiyuan grew up in such an environment, so it was no wonder that he was so knowledgeable. However, this was also related to his weak physique, which made it difficult for him to have any achievements in cultivation. It was said that he had an elder brother who was currently serving in the Right Army. Even though his current position wasn't as high as Tao Jiyuan's, his prospects were far greater. In the eyes of the aboriginals, a position in the army was the one with the greatest prospects. At least, when Tao Jiyuan mentioned his elder brother, his tone was full of longing. Everyone didn't have to wait for long before they saw 3 people hurrying down from the mountain. They were all wearing leather armor and had thick sabers hanging from their waists. "I'm the one in charge of guarding this valley. Do you have Her Majesty's warrant with you?" The leader was a burly man in his 40s with a big beard and dusty leather armor. He cupped his hands and spoke loudly. At the same time, his gaze wandered across the few people. He could naturally recognize the winged cavalry at a glance. After all, this was the only unit with a colorful sparrow feather on their shoulders. However, his gaze was more focused on Ren Baqin and Tao Jiyuan. It was obvious that these two were the ones in charge here. Even though the winged cavalry was powerful, they were Her Majesty's personal army and obviously had nothing to do with him. "This is Imperial Deputy Prefect Ren. This is Minister Tao of the Military Arms Department. I am Lieutenant Tingji of the Winged Cavalry. This time I am here on Her Majesty's warrant to patrol this place and look for ways to expand the mining." As Tingji spoke, he threw a piece of white paper out as if it was a hard object. Gu Qiong caught it with one hand and glanced at it. Following which, he smiled and said, "So it's the few of you. Please come in." Ren Baqin and Tao Jiyuan didn't board the carriage anymore. They walked towards Gu Qiong and cupped their hands as a form of greeting. "General Gu, please lead the way." The rest of the people followed behind. Ren Baqin couldn't see the entire view from the foot of the mountain. However, as Gu Qiong walked up, he gradually saw the entire view of Mount Damo and the mine. The most eye-catching part was Mount Damo. It was 600 to 700 meters tall and looked like an upside-down pot lid. There was almost no vegetation on the entire mountain, especially in the direction where everyone was standing. It was as if a section of the mountain had been chopped off and only uneven rocks could be seen. At the foot of the mountain, there were at least 1,000 people busily working. They were holding hammers and pickaxes and were working hard to cut open the mountain. They were also moving the rocks that they had smashed down. Chapter 160. Mining on Mount Damo has been going on for close to 100 years, but there hasn't been much progress. Mount Damo can be said to be completely made of iron. It is extremely hard and difficult to mine. After so many years, it has only been mined to the extent that you can see now. One person might not even be able to mine one piece in a day. Gu Qiong led the crowd in the direction of Mount Damo and introduced them to Ren Baqin. He actually knew Tao Jiyuan as he had met him a few times before. This time, this Imperial Deputy Prefect had a special status and was here for the first time. He was the one who needed to be introduced. Ren Baqin's previous understanding of iron ore came from the information he found on the internet. After listening to Gu Qiong's introduction, he realized that Mount Damo might be different from what he had imagined. As they got closer to Mount Damo, the soldiers from the 3 nations who were locked up here appeared in front of them. Other than the guards, very few outsiders came here. In particular, there was a Dayo official in the middle of a group of aboriginals who was obviously different from the rest. This made many people's eyes light up. These people had been locked up here for the longest period of 20 years and the shortest period was at least 5 years. They were constantly thinking of leaving this place and returning to their homes. However, the 300 guards were enough to suppress any riots here. In the past, no one who had such thoughts survived, regardless of whether they fought back or escaped. This made the remaining people somewhat resigned to their fate. However, today they actually saw an official who wasn't an aboriginal. Even though he was still a Dayo official, it gave these people a little hope. One by one they stood on the spot and looked over expectantly. What are you all standing there for? Get out of the way and get to work. If you continue to slack off, I will hang your heads over the wall. A few guards with knives drove the crowd away. Where are they from? Rinpoche also noticed that these people were obviously from the other three nations. The aboriginals still trade slaves? Rinpoche immediately thought of this. They are soldiers from Great Xia, the Yin nation and the Qin nation. There are also some death row prisoners from the south. Gu Qiong introduced them to Rinpoche. He was also curious about the identity of this imperial deputy prefect. Not only was he a secondary class, rank 5 official, but he was also in charge of the imperial deputy prefect, an organization that was responsible for the affairs of the palace. Even though the news about the Empress's husband had spread like wildfire in Lan City and its surrounding areas, and even some of the mountain villages had heard about it, it was obvious that Rinpoche hadn't heard about it yet. Rinpoche immediately understood after hearing this. The aboriginals weren't stupid and knew how to use war criminals to open up mines. As for the prisoners on death row in the south, they were the remnant citizens of the Hao nation. Rinpoche sized up these people as he walked. Their complexions were still all right, completely different from the sallow and emaciated state he had imagined. Many of them had bulging muscles. After all, working here, even an ordinary person's body would develop a body of muscles after a long time. However, if he really had the body of an ordinary person, he probably wouldn't be able to live for long. Everyone was only wearing tattered pants, and their tanned upper bodies were covered in scars. Some were from mining and some were from whips. Apart from that, each of them had a rope tied around their feet. Every 3 of them were tied together, and the distance between them was about 2 meters. After asking, Rinpoche found out that the rope was woven from the bark of a type of tree known as the knot tree and then soaked in oil. It was very sturdy and even a man-realm expert couldn't tear it apart. Even swords would have to expend some effort to cut it. On the way up, Rinpoche saw a few people with missing limbs. They were using their hands to pick up the scattered slag from the ground and put it into a basket. While observing these people, he also saw that they were looking at him with hope in their eyes. Their numb eyes were filled with a look of longing. Rinpoche knew what they were longing for, but it was a pity that he couldn't help them. After the people in front were driven away, Rinpoche followed Gu Qiong to the front of Mount Damo. From where everyone got off the train at the foot of the mountain, the first thing they saw was a large platform with many wooden houses. This was where everyone rested. Following which there was another small platform. After which there was a pitch-black Mount Damo without any soil or weeds. It was as if it was made of iron. The mining here was done layer by layer from the outside to the inside. There were no tunnels or anything like that. There were all kinds of racks in front of Mount Damo. Everyone climbed on the racks and slowly mined along the protruding edges. This way it would be easier. However, after reaching a certain height, even the racks couldn't reach the top. Hence they had to continue digging deeper. Sir, the iron mine in Mount Damo is really difficult to mine. Even with my strength, I can only mine a small piece in one go. As Gu Qiong spoke, he picked up a pickaxe from the side and smashed it against the dark iron wall with a whistling sound. Dang! Sparks flew from the explosion. The wooden rake of the pickaxe was immediately smashed into pieces. The head of the pickaxe flew out and spun a few times in the air before falling to the ground. Along with the head of the pickaxe, there were some small fragments that were about the size of a fist. Those people can't even mine such a big piece in a day. So hard? Even though Rinpoche had heard about it before, he was still shocked. Even though he didn't know Gu Qiong's actual strength as the person in charge of this mine, he had 300 guards under him. His strength couldn't be weak. Furthermore, Rinpoche clearly saw that the wooden handle of the pickaxe, which was as thick as a wrist, was directly smashed into pieces. Even if he didn't use 500 kilograms of force, he still only managed to smash out a piece the size of a fist. How was this a mine? This was simply an iron mountain. Rinpoche stretched out his hand and touched it. It was indeed iron. The iron content was at least 95% and there were very few rocks. If it wasn't for the fact that there were very few rocks, Rinpoche would have thought that this was man-made and not naturally formed. Even though there were rocks, they were very hard. Rinpoche picked up an iron awl from the ground and pressed it against the link between the iron ore and the rocks. He used a hammer and hit it with all his might. At that moment, sparks flew and there was only a white dot on the rock. Looking at this situation, Rinpoche wasn't very confident about the explosives that he had brought. Even if it was effective, it probably wouldn't meet his expectations. I have no other way. Sir, please feel free to look around. Gu Qiong didn't have much hope for the two of them. In fact, in his heart he could only mine slowly like this. He wasn't very optimistic about the purpose of their trip. Tao Jiyuan was already clear about the situation here. He looked at Rinpoche with ease and wanted to see if this person, who was personally appointed by Her Majesty, was really capable. After interacting with Rinpoche for a few days, she could tell from his words that he indeed had some ideas in some areas. Furthermore, he always said some strange things, but it was useless to just talk. There were plenty of countries that were full of boastful words. He was also a little unconvinced that this person was actually favored by Her Majesty. Therefore, he wanted to see if this person was relying on Her Majesty's favor to be whimsical and deceive Her Majesty with his big talk, or if he really had a way. If he was personally appointed by Her Majesty to be the person in charge with great fanfare and returned with his tail between his legs, it would be interesting. Chapter 161. Rinpoche looked at the iron mountain in front of him. He had some doubts in his heart. Was this really a natural product? Compared to a mine, Rinpoche was more willing to believe that this was a huge piece of meteorite. Unless, billions of years ago, such a huge piece of meteorite fell on the ground. Then, after many years of tectonic movements, the huge basin that should have appeared here became a plain, and this piece of meteorite became Mount Damo. In Rinpoche's heart, this was more likely than a natural product. Otherwise, this iron mountain would be too unusual. Can we make a few holes here? Rinpoche pointed to the protruding part of the mountain wall above his head and asked Gu Qiong. The hole was the size of a fist and had to be at least 1.5 feet deep. The rock wall began to protrude about 3 to 4 meters above Rinpoche's position. It should be very difficult to mine at that height. However, if he were to make a few holes in that area and use explosives, it was very likely that a big piece would be blown off. After all, he wasn't an expert in explosives. He could only roughly guess where the explosion would be more effective. Sir Deputy Prefect, although I don't know what you are planning, but it is indeed impossible to make such a big hole. At most, I can make a hole that is the size of a fist. Any deeper and we have to dig to the side. Gu Qiong said with a troubled look. Rinpoche frowned after hearing this. Gu Qiong's words should be true. However, in this case it would be very difficult for explosives to be of much use. In this kind of situation, if it was on Earth, there were many ways to think of. For example, using acetylene to cut the rock piece by piece. However, most of these methods either required electricity or gas tanks. For example, he could only bring 1 bottle of acetylene at a time. Furthermore, he had to bring it all the way here. Otherwise, based on the road conditions in Dayo, he was afraid that it would blow up halfway. However, if he brought it here, his secret would be exposed to people other than the Empress. This was unacceptable. Bring me around Mount Damo to take a look. Rinpoche pondered for a long time. It was better to take a look at the surrounding situation first. There was still some time before the sky turned dark. At the very least, they could take a look at the situation of the Iron Mountain. Rinpoche realized that this mountain was indeed like what he had imagined. It was a gigantic meteorite. The structure of this mountain was completely different from the surrounding land. All the iron ores were gathered on the mountain. Furthermore, there were very few plants growing on the mountain. All the plants were weeds and the like, which were relatively hardy. It was likely that the dust accumulated on the mountain over many years had formed a layer of soil on the surface of the mountain. On the way back, Tao Jiyuan asked the frowning Rinpoche, "Sir Rin, do you have any ideas?" "I have an idea, but I still have to try to see if it will work." Rinpoche was startled out of his thoughts. He raised his head and glanced at him. "That's great. Over the years, countless people have tried to find ways to speed up the mining of the iron ore on Mount Damo. They could only use manpower to mine it bit by bit. If Sir Rin has a way, it would definitely be a great contribution," Tao Jiyuan said with a smile on his face. "In my opinion, rather than mining here, it would be faster to go out and rob," Gu Qiong muttered. Rinpoche rolled his eyes. Wasn't this nonsense? Most of the time, robbing was faster than mining and manufacturing. The problem was it that easy? By the time they returned to the camp, the sky was already dark. The convicts and laborers had also returned like a swarm of bees. They surrounded a few big barrels in the middle of the square and waited for the meat soup. However, very few of them spoke. They had been living like this for many years, and there were very few new convicts being sent over. Rinpoche could smell the aroma of the meat soup from afar. The food is good. If they don't eat their fill, they won't have the strength to work. After all, if they don't have enough strength, they won't even be able to chisel a small piece of this iron mountain. Rinpoche nodded. Gu Qiong had already prepared a wooden hut for him. Their dinner was also meat soup, but with some wild vegetables and 2 rations. Even for Gu Qiong, this was what he usually ate. This place was in the middle of nowhere. Other than the people who delivered the meat, there wasn't anyone else around. It was impossible to get anything else to eat even if he wanted to. After finishing his meal, Rinpoche had a good night's rest. When he woke up the next day, he called Gu Qiong and Tao Jiyuan to his room and said, "I have an idea that we should try. Pile a large amount of wood on Mount Damo and then pour water on it. After thermal expansion and contraction, cracks will appear on the metal. This should make it easier to chisel the mountain." Although Rinpoche said this, he wasn't optimistic about this idea. After all, transporting a large amount of wood would require a lot of manpower. Even though it would be easier than now, the efficiency would still be too low if the manpower needed to cut and transport the wood, as well as the time needed to set fire to the mountain and wash it with cold water. It wouldn't be much better than now. On the other hand, he had another idea. It was to go back and make a large number of mirrors and concave mirrors. He would adjust the angle of the concave mirrors and aim them at the mountain wall. Then he would use the mirrors to reflect the sunlight onto the concave mirrors. This way, the metal could be melted into molten iron in a very short period of time through the reflected light from the concave mirrors. After that, it would be much easier to extract and separate the molten iron. Thermal expansion and contraction? What does that mean? Tao Jiyuan didn't know what Rinpoche was thinking. He was very interested and curious about his idea. "We can demonstrate it." Rinpoche pulled everyone out of the house. "Start a fire first." Rinpoche gave the order. Gu Qiong immediately called someone to get the wood according to Rinpoche's instructions. After a while, a fire was started. Rinpoche picked up 2 stones and asked someone to use 2 iron awls to roast them on the outside of the fire. The rest of them looked at the instructions and were curious about what he was going to do. After a while, Rinpoche estimated that it was about time and asked someone to throw the stones into a bucket of water that was prepared at the side. First, there were some bubbles. After a few minutes, Rinpoche reached into the bucket and fished the stones out. There were already a few cracks on them. Rinpoche showed the stones to everyone. The rest didn't notice anything wrong, but Tao Jiyuan had a sudden realization and said, "I see." This was a very normal natural phenomenon. It wasn't that no one had discovered it. It was just that no one had summarized it or investigated the cause. Therefore, there was no concept of thermal expansion and contraction. Furthermore, no one had thought of applying this phenomenon to Mount Damo. Why is that? Tao Jiyuan asked curiously after a sudden realization. Because an object will expand after being heated. Even if you can't see it with your eyes, it is still expanding. And when an object is cold, it will contract. If this expansion and contraction situation occurs in a short period of time, such a change will occur. This is not only the case for stones but also for iron. Rinpoche gave a rough explanation. If he were to talk about molecules, Tao Jiyuan would definitely not understand. Tao Jiyuan pondered. Gu Qiong widened his eyes and asked, "Sir Rin, are you thinking of burning down Mount Damo?" "Just burn one place will do." Rinpoche looked around. Even though there wasn't much vegetation on Mount Damo, there was vegetation on the surrounding mountains. Rinpoche asked someone to chop some wood to burn the mountain. Even though the efficiency was still very low, it was worth a try. It would at least speed up the mining process. When he went back, he would research on how to make a concave mirror. By then, he would be able to completely solve the mining problem of Mount Damo. Chapter 162. Sir Rin, do you think this method will work? Tao Jiyuan raised his doubts. Although burning a rock was like that, he still felt that this idea was a bit ridiculous. Not only him, Gu Qiong, Tingji, and the others who were listening at the side all had the same thought. We will only know if it's feasible after trying. After all, we don't have any better ideas now, right? Rinpoche spread his hands. That's true. Tao Jiyuan nodded. Lord Gu, I'll have to trouble you to arrange it. Next, Gu Qiong selected 100 guards to escort the 300 convicts to a faraway place to chop wood. 3 prisoners were tied together with ropes. 300 prisoners were exactly 100 groups, and 100 guards were just enough to keep watch. Mount Damo was an anomaly. There were many other mountains in the vicinity, and every single one of them was lush and green. Only Mount Damo was barren, without a single blade of grass. The distance needed to cut down the wood was not considered short. After all, the nearby daily cooking was almost done. After a whole day, a total of 30 tree trunks with a diameter of more than 20 centimeters and a length of more than 3 meters were brought back. The prisoners in the mine also stopped digging. They dragged the 30 logs to the platform at the foot of Mount Damo and chopped them into smaller pieces. After working for 2 whole days, a total of 50 tree trunks were dragged back. The ones that were brought back on the first day had been chopped into lumber the size of an arm. Now all that was left was to burn the mountain. A group of more than 100 people, along with over 20 carts and over 70 forkhorn cows, advanced towards Mount Damo. The forkhorn cow was one of the most commonly used meats in Dayo. Its growth rate was very fast, at least 50% faster than the crooked cow. The crooked cow took 5 years to mature, but the forkhorn cow only needed 3 years to mature. However, the taste of this kind of beef was very ordinary. It was relatively dry, which was what the army usually ate. The rest of them were here to deliver supplies to the Mount Damo iron mine. Every 20 days, apart from food, they would also deliver some forged pickaxes, iron awls, and other digging tools. The Mount Damo iron mine had used up a lot of tools. "Brigade Commander, look over there." Someone immediately shouted when they saw thick smoke billowing in the direction of Mount Damo as they turned a corner. In Dayo, 10 people formed a team. The team leader was a secondary class, rank 9. The 12 squads formed a brigade with a brigade commander, who was a secondary class 8th pin. 5 brigades made up a regiment, with lieutenants ranging from secondary 7th rank to primary 6th rank. Usually, a regiment would have 650 to 700 people, including logistics. The 5 regiments would form an army with 3,300 to 3,800 men. 5 armies for 1 prefecture, about 15,000 people. This was an entire brigade. When the brigade marshal heard this, he raised his head and his facial expression immediately changed. "Something has happened at Mount Damo. 2 of you will go back and report. 1 of you will guard this place. The rest of you, put down your things and follow me with your weapons." Once the order was given, everyone threw aside the things they were carrying. With one hand tightly holding onto the long sword, they marched quickly towards Mount Damo. The brigade commander frowned as he advanced. How could something happen to Mount Damo? Could it be that the prisoners were rebelling? But even if they rebelled, the 300 guards there were enough to defeat them. In fact, they didn't even need 300 people. 200 people would be able to completely defeat them. So what's with this thick smoke? This was clearly arson. As he was thinking and worrying about the situation at Mount Damo, the brigade marshal and his men traveled 60 kilometers in 4 hours and arrived at the foot of Mount Damo in a hurry. However, it was different from the chaos he had imagined. The guards at the foot of the mountain were still standing there quietly as if nothing had happened. What happened? The brigade marshal asked hurriedly as he looked up at the thick smoke above. It was like a pillar of smoke, and the smell of burning could be smelled from here. Nothing happened. "Everything is normal," the guard immediately answered. The brigade marshal was relieved when he heard this. Then he was dumbfounded. Since nothing happened, what was going on up there? "Brigade Marshal Sheng, you will know when you go up and take a look." The guard didn't understand the details and said, "They said that they want to burn Mount Damo." "Burn Mount Damo? How could this be possible? Wasn't this nonsense?" When the brigade marshal heard this, he thought about how he and the others had rushed over here because of this matter, and he couldn't help but feel angry. "Go back and send the supplies here. In addition, get someone to chase those 2 back. I will go up and take a look." After saying this, Brigade Marshal Sheng wiped the sweat off his forehead and hurried up the mountain. At this moment, Rinpochen and the others stood in front of the wooden house and looked at the fire in the distance. A large amount of wood was burning there, and the soaring flames made it difficult for people to approach. "General Xing Kaishan pays his respects to all of you." Xing Kaishan's eyes narrowed when he saw them. What surprised him the most wasn't the rank of Rinpochen and Tao Jiyuan, but the fact that he actually saw the winged cavalry here. One had to know that the winged cavalry were the Empress's personal guards and wouldn't be easily mobilized. Who were the people who came this time? This is Imperial Deputy Prefect Ren, Sir Tao from the Ordnance Department, and Sir Ting Ji from Lan City. Kaishan, you should have arrived by now. Why are you here alone? Where are the things? Ting Ji stretched his neck and looked into the distance. Other than Kaishan, there was no one behind him. Kaishan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Sergu, I saw the smoke pillar from afar and thought that something had happened. I rushed here and left the things behind. They are now back with the convoy. Gu Qiong burst into laughter upon hearing this. After a while, Kaishan carefully asked, Sir, what are they doing? That Deputy Prefect Ren said that they were going to heat it up and pour some water on it to see if it would crack. Gu Qiong stroked his beard and turned his head. This iron mountain is full of iron. Isn't this quenching? Xing Kaishan was puzzled. Even if he didn't know how to forge iron, he had more or less heard of quenching. Wasn't it just putting the forged iron into water? What was the difference between this and quenching? That's right. Gu Qiong slapped his thigh. Why didn't I think of this? Sir Ren, isn't this quenching? Gu Qiong turned his head and shouted. Ren Baqin nodded after hearing what he said. Quenching has a special process and requirements. Usually, the carbon and other substances in the iron have already been expelled by hammering to become steel. Even so, if something goes wrong it will crack, let alone iron. You don't have to worry about this. After hearing what Ren Baqin said, everyone was puzzled. In any case, it sounded like Sir Ren was stronger than them. I didn't expect Sir Ren to know how to forge, Tao Jiyuan casually said. I know a little. Let's keep the fire burning until the afternoon. Don't add more firewood after noon. I will go back to my room to rest. Ren Baqin bade farewell to them and returned to his room. When it was 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Ren Baqin estimated that it was about time. He walked out of the wooden hut and asked someone to call Tao Jiyuan, Gu Qiong, and the rest out. After the fire started to die down, Ren Baqin instructed, get some water and pour it directly on Mount Damo. Everyone immediately got into action after hearing this. The rest of them also perked up. This time they only burned an area that was 10 meters long. As they poured buckets of water onto the mountain wall, sizzling sounds could be heard. Every bucket of water that was poured onto the mountain wall created a cloud of white steam. Soon the people nearby could no longer stand. Seeing this, Ren Baqin retreated a little further. After an hour, Ren Baqin waved his hand to stop everyone and said, It's about time. Let's go and take a look after the steam dissipates. They waited until the sky turned dark. Then they raised their torches and approached the mountain. Can it really split open? Those who knew the whole story did not have much confidence. One by one they looked at Ren Baqin. We will know soon, Ren Baqin said. He was a little nervous. What he knew was only theory. If it did not succeed it would be embarrassing. Moreover, a large number of concave mirrors could not be produced in a short period of time. He was afraid that he would be helpless in this place. As the torches shone on the mountain wall, everyone saw that it was still the same as before. Immediately their hearts skipped a beat. Could it be that it did not succeed? Ren Baqin did not say a word. He walked until he was 1 meter away from the mountain wall and stopped. He carefully examined the mountain wall. Finally, a look of relief appeared on his face. Cracks, it actually split open. Gu Qiong walked to Ren Baqin's side and carefully examined the mountain wall. Immediately he shouted in surprise. Under the light of the torches, the mountain wall of Mount Damo was covered with small cracks. Although the cracks were not very big, the speed of mining along the cracks would be at least 2 times faster. Sir Ren, this method actually worked. I really admire you. Sir Ren has contributed greatly this time. Tao Jiyuan stepped forward and saw the cracks on the mountain wall. At first he was surprised. Then he revealed a look of congratulations. Chapter 163. Ren Baqin sat on a chair in a daze. This was a shady place and the surrounding temperature was as hot as a fire. According to the season of Great Xia, it was already late autumn, but the weather was still extremely hot. Clanking sounds of chiseling could be heard from Mount Damo in the distance. After burning the mountain yesterday, hair-thin cracks appeared on the mountain wall. Gu Qiong and Tao Jiyuan were overjoyed. They felt that they had found a way to excavate Mount Damo. However, Ren Baqin was not as optimistic as the two of them. He reckoned that only the surface of the mountain had changed. Of course, this was because both parties had different requirements. Ren Baqin wanted to obtain iron ores that could be used to forge weapons for the 20,000 soldiers. Dayo's standard thick-backed sabers were not the kind that ordinary people used. Each saber weighed about 20 kilograms and required at least 22 kilograms of iron ores. On Mount Damo, 1,000 prisoners could only mine 80 kilograms of iron ores in a day, which could only be used to forge 4 sabers. After 2 years, they would only be able to forge about 2,000 ores. Furthermore, all of these ores would be used by the army. One had to know that Dayo didn't only require weapons for the army. It also required hunters in the mountains and ironware for daily use. Rinpoche did not go to Mount Liutsue, but he had asked Tao Jiyuan about it. It was located in the mountains and the mountain paths were difficult to traverse. Even though mining was much easier, transporting the ores was also a big problem. What could a country with a population of 30 to 40 million people produce 10,000 to 20,000 kilograms of iron ores in a year? Sir, today's ores weigh at least 400 to 500 kilograms. This is the amount that was mined in the past 4 to 5 days. Rinpoche did not know when he fell asleep. He was woken up by Gu Qiong's loud and excited voice. Oh, 400 to 500 kilograms? Rinpoche rubbed his eyes. Starting a fire would take a day, then watering the ores. After that, it would take another day to mine the ores. Then bring out more wood. It would be best to mobilize some manpower from the surrounding cities to transport the wood. Then we will burn the mountains separately. One day on the east side and one day on the west side. We will take turns burning the mountains and mining. This will increase the efficiency. Rinpoche stretched his body and said. He wondered what the surrounding mountains would look like in a few years. After all, if they wanted to burn this iron mountain for mining, the amount of wood consumed in a year was not a small amount. However, the growth of trees took 10 years. Moreover, with the decrease in the surrounding wood, if they wanted to maintain this mining speed in the future, they would need to send wood from afar, and that would require even more manpower. Let's leave it at that for now. I'll go back and study that concave mirror. Sir Rin is right. Tao Jiyuan saw that Rinpoche had doubled the output of the iron ore in just 1 or 2 days. Furthermore, if Rinpoche had done what he said just now, the output would have increased by 3 or 4 times. He immediately felt some admiration for him. However, I'm afraid this matter will require His Majesty's orders. Let's go take a look. Rinpoche got up and asked Gu Qiong to lead the way. They went to the foot of Mount Damo to study and observe. As expected, it was just a thin layer. The length of half a finger was about 3 centimeters. Physician Tao, I'll have to trouble you to submit a memorial to Her Majesty and explain the situation here, Rinpoche said as he turned around. During dinner, Tao Jiyuan and Gu Qiong's faces were still filled with excitement. Rinpoche didn't want to disturb their enthusiasm and just said, I'm going to have a good rest tomorrow. Don't disturb me no matter how big the matter is. You don't have to prepare food for me either. Yes, Sir Ren. After bidding farewell to them, Rinpoche returned to his room and returned to Earth when everyone was about to fall asleep. It was evening on Earth. Rinpoche first turned on his computer and searched for the news that he had read before. He typed in the keywords and quickly found more than one. 70 years ago, someone had done such an experiment. The first 50 kilowatt solar furnace made of liquid mirrors could melt a steel plate that was 1 centimeter thick in 30 seconds. 50 years ago, a laboratory was built using 10,000 concave mirrors. It could reach a power of 1,000 kilowatts and instantly reach a temperature of 3,500 degrees Celsius. The melting point of iron was only 1,538 degrees Celsius. Therefore, there was no need for such a large mirror. It just needed to be a little smaller. In a video on the internet, a foreign guy used 5,800 fingernail-sized mirrors to melt a satellite pot lid. All these proved that Rinpoche's previous idea was feasible. It didn't need to be as big as the foreign laboratory. It only needed to be 1/10 the size. It could even be divided into 10 parts and assembled together. After all, it was just to melt the wall of Mount Damo. There wasn't a high requirement for precision. As long as the focal point was within a certain range and the temperature within that range was sufficient, it would be sufficient. That night, Rinpoche contacted a physics professor from a university in the city through Chin. They met up the next day and Rinpoche told him his request. He needed a solar furnace that could be made of concave mirrors that could be moved and angled. It could melt steel that was 300 to 400 meters away. The other party needed to provide him with a solar furnace that could be carried by a single person. He also needed to make molds for the concave mirrors in Dayo and a series of installation plans for the concave mirrors. To Rinpoche, this was very troublesome. However, to the other party, this matter was very simple. After all, Rinpoche didn't have high requirements for precision. He could even throw it to his students and the remuneration was 500,000 yuan. After settling this matter, Rinpoche rested for 2 days before returning to Dayo. Mount Liutsue was actually on the outskirts of the 60,000 mountains on the west side of Dayo. However, to reach the location of the iron ore mine, one would need to walk for 2 days. Furthermore, the mountain road was very difficult. It was the biggest difficulty in transporting the iron ore. A few days after leaving Mount Damo, Rinpoche walked on this mountain road. When he first entered the mountain road was still all right. After all, this road was often used by people. However, after a day the mountain road started to meander and it became difficult to walk. On one side was a mountain wall and on the other side was a mountain stream. There was only a 1-meter wide road in the middle. Even though people could walk, it was impossible for people to ride on mounts. Even if people could walk, they wouldn't be able to walk fast. At least, every time Rinpoche glanced at the bottom of the cliff, he would feel dizzy. One had to know that it was 200 to 300 meters below the cliff. If he fell, he would immediately become a meat patty. Rinpoche suddenly realized that he had a big weakness. He was afraid of heights. He didn't realize this previously. Seeing him like this, Tingji was also on tenterhooks. He followed closely behind Rinpoche, ready to pull him up at any time. If something were to happen to this person, he wouldn't be able to go back. After walking on this road for half a day, they finally arrived at a valley with cliffs on 3 sides. Rinpoche could finally relax and felt that he was alive again. The valley wasn't too big. Other than over 100 guards, there were about 700 to 800 people mining here. Chapter 164. In the valley where Mount Liutsue's iron mine was located, the ground was so hard that not even weeds could grow. Not long after entering, there were a few rows of wooden buildings. There were no fences or anything like that around them. Most of the people here were aboriginals. After mining here for a few years, they would be released early. Usually no one escaped and the guards were not strict. Rinpoche had already stayed here for 2 days. Every day he would use a piece of cloth to cover his face and walk around. There was too much dust in the valley. All of it had drifted over from the mines. When one woke up, they would find that their surroundings were covered in dust. The quality of this iron ore mine was average, but it was easy to mine. It was currently the most productive iron ore mine in Dayo, although it was not much compared to the iron ore on Earth. For the past 2 days, Rinpoche had been pondering how to make transportation easier. As long as the supply and the transportation of ores could keep up, the output of the iron mine could increase by several times or even more. The valley was surrounded by cliffs on 3 sides, and one of them was the narrow path. Regardless of whether it was the ore being transported out or the supplies being transported in, they all passed through this path. On the other side was a deep mountain stream. There was a stream at the bottom, but after a short distance, it flowed into the ground. As for the other 2 sides, they both led to the 60,000 mountains, and it was not easy to get in and out. It was not realistic to open a path from this side. At first, Rinpoche considered using a cable to transport the weapons. However, if Dayo had the steel to make cables, it would have been used to forge weapons. Furthermore, the materials required for the cable could only be produced in Dayo in a few years. Moreover, the support required for the cable was something that was difficult to build in this world. As for the rope, there was no need to think about it. It would wear out too quickly and it was not practical to use it to transport ores. In addition, Rinpoche had also considered using hot air balloons. However, considering the difficulty of manufacturing hot air balloons and the amount of fuel required, he was afraid that the transportation speed of 2 or 3 hot air balloons wouldn't be much faster than the current method of carrying people. Not to mention the airflow in the valley, hot air balloons were never meant to be used as a means of transportation. No matter how he thought about it, the only possibility was to open a tunnel. Rinpoche pointed at the mountain in front of them and asked Tao Jiuan, "Have you ever thought of opening a hole on this mountain that leads directly to the other side?" "Sure, Sir Rin, just think about it and don't say it out loud," Tao Jiuan said nervously. "What's wrong?" Rinpoche was astonished. It's said that there's an unknown existence in this mountain. In the past, the Hao nation also wanted to dig through this mountain, but it would collapse after digging for a few hundred feet. They dug a total of 3 times. The 3rd time they angered the existence inside the mountain. Not only did the miners die, but the 2,000 soldiers outside also died. Not a single person survived. From then on, the Hao nation never thought of digging up the mountain again. Rinpoche looked at Tao Jiuan suspiciously. Was it really that scary? How many years has it been? Really? Rinpoche found it hard to believe. It's been 100 years, but no one dares to touch this mountain. Tao Jiuan smiled bitterly. Rinpoche thought about the Kirin that he had seen before. This world was too different from Earth and there were too many unknowns. Tao Jiuan's words might not be true. Can the mountain road be widened? Ren Baqian asked again after putting the previous question aside. Since they couldn't dig a tunnel, it would be good if they could expand the mountain path to 3 meters so that forkhorn cows could pass through. Although this was a huge project, the iron mine was the foundation of a nation. It was acceptable to pay a higher price. Moreover, he could get his hands on explosives to blow up the mountain wall. Tao Jiyuan's expression became strange. This mountain road can only be so wide. The more we dig, the more the road will collapse. It has always been this wide. Ren Baqian looked up at the mountain in front of him. In this case he had no other choice. Digging and touching can't be done. Are you trying to scam me? What exactly is in this mountain? If I have the chance, I really want to dig it up and take a look. However, this idea was just a thought. Ren Baqian wasn't someone who liked to take risks and court death. In this case, there's no point for us to stay here. Let's leave tomorrow. Ren Baqian sighed. This time, I'm just accompanying Sir Ren to take a look. Tao Jiyuan laughed. If Ren Baqian didn't want to take a look, he wouldn't have come here. Is it okay to dig here? Ren Baqian asked again. If we dig here, we won't care about the thing inside, Tao Jiyuan said directly. But I still don't like this place. Ren Baqian nodded. His hair stood on end when he heard what Tao Jiyuan said. In any case, there was already a plan for Mount Damo. Transportation there was convenient. As long as he could use the solar furnace to melt the iron mountain, he would be able to obtain enough iron in a short period of time. His purpose for coming here this time would be achieved. He would explore Mount Liuzue in the future when he had the opportunity. The two of them stood there and looked for a while. Ren Baqian decided to go back and rest for a night before setting off. On the way back, he saw the guards pulling 2 crooked cows in the direction of the 60,000 mountains and walking up the mountain. Ren Baqian had seen them kill cows a few times over the past 2 days, but they had never brought the cows so far away. As a result, he was puzzled and asked, "What are they doing?" Tao Jiyuan thought for a while and called a guard over to ask. "The beachy is going down the mountain. These are prepared for it. After eating these 2 cows, it won't come down to eat anything else," the guard said to the 2 of them. "What's a beachy?" Ren Baqian asked curiously. In his impression, the aboriginals would just pick up a knife and slash anything they saw. When had they ever paid tribute? Tao Jiyuan revealed a look of realization and said, "So it's a beachy. It's a ferocious beast in the 60,000 mountains. It looks like a mountain rat, has wings and can run and fly. Furthermore, it's as fast as lightning. Even experienced hunters in the mountains would find it difficult to kill it. Instead, it would find an opportunity to launch a sneak attack." Sir is right. The beachy will come down the mountain twice every spring and autumn. If it can't find anything to eat, it will attack the other cows here and bite all of them to death. If it is beaten, it will find an opportunity to retaliate. As a result, 2 cows are placed on the mountain every time. After it eats them, it won't come down, the guard said. At first, Ren Baqian thought it was a bat, but he realized it wasn't. It seemed like it was a creature unique to this world. Its vengeful nature was similar to that of a weasel. "Can I see it if I find a place to hide?" Ren Baqian asked curiously. He was somewhat interested in this kind of strange animal in this world. "Sir, it's better not to see it. It's said that those who see the beachy will encounter disaster. It's extremely accurate." Chapter 165. Ren Baqian had always felt that he was rather cowardly, but wasn't cowardice the longer one could live? Every day there were so many people who felt that they were powerful and wanted to die. In the end they really died. This kind of news made people vigilant. For example, a woman's clothes were scratched by a tire repairman, and she refused to forgive him. Her father also grabbed the repairman and beat him, even if the repairman knelt down and begged for mercy. One had to know that kneeling in China was a big deal. However, the father and daughter were still unwilling to give up and continued to smash the stall. In the end, the common man was enraged and his blood splattered 3 feet. Every time Ren Baqian saw such news, he would be on high alert. It was better to be a coward. Just like in the afternoon, when he heard that anyone who saw a beachy would encounter a disaster and that it was extremely effective, he immediately followed the advice and suppressed his great curiosity. Even if she looked like a flower, he wouldn't look at her anymore. But what is this little thing in front of me now? Ren Baqian's head was filled with question marks. It was crimson red and looked a little like a fox. Its bean-sized eyes were full of cunning. Most importantly, it had a pair of wings on its back, fleshy like a bat's. Just now, when Ren Baqian was in a daze in the room, this little thing suddenly came in through the window and stared at Rinpoche. I'm already avoiding you and there's no enmity between us. Why do you have to do this? Rinpoche looked innocent. Rinpoche felt that it was necessary for him to know what the other party was up to. It couldn't be that they were just here to see him, right? Although the other party was a wild beasts were intelligent. Even crows had the IQ of an 8-year-old child. The intelligence of weasels and foxes was not low, so the person in front of him should not be an idiot, right? Take whatever you like. Consider it as a gift from me, Rinpoche said tentatively. It was obvious that Rinpoche was overthinking. At the very least, the other party didn't understand human nature and didn't know what he was talking about. Her pair of bean-sized eyes continued to stare at him. Rinpoche suddenly realized that this little thing's eyes didn't seem to be staring at him. Instead, it was staring at his hand or the side of his hand. This little thing's eyes were so big and it was staring right at him. He didn't know what it was looking at, but he subconsciously felt that it was staring at him. After some time, Rinpoche finally realized that the other party wasn't looking at him. Instead, it was the white rabbit creamy candies in his hand. Rinpoche picked up the white rabbit creamy candy and shook it left and right. The little creature's eyes also moved left and right. I'm giving it to you. Remember to peel it open and eat it. Rinpoche didn't know if it could understand him, so he threw the bag of white rabbit creamy candy to the side. In a flash, the little thing picked up the bag with its mouth, transformed into a scarlet shadow, and disappeared into the night sky outside the window. Rinpoche rubbed his head. Just now he had nothing to do and ate 2 pieces of candy. Was this thing attracted by the candy? That shouldn't be possible. The 2 cows were led up the mountain. They were so far away. Even an immortal wouldn't be able to smell the sugar. But no matter what, the white rabbit had once again performed a meritorious deed. Lin Chaola, the Empress, and this is called a bichi, right? The white rabbit's charm was irresistible. After thinking about it, Rinpoche decided to close the window. Even if it was a little stuffy, he would accept it. In the middle of the night, Rinpoche felt that he had a dream. In his dream, the mountains were shaking, and there was a loud roar of a beast in the distance. Just when he wanted to investigate further, he suddenly heard a rumbling sound from the surroundings. Then the entire house collapsed. Tengji and Tao Jiyuan felt the ground trembling and hurriedly ran out of the room. Just when they wanted to pull Rinpoche out of the room, they heard a rumbling sound. The wooden house that Rinpoche was staying in had collapsed. Immediately the 2 of them tensed up. Anything could happen to anyone during this trip, except for the person inside the house. However, something had to happen to him. Save him, quickly save him, Tao Jiyuan shouted loudly. Without saying a word, Tengji rushed to the front of the house and started to lift up the collapsed roof. When the house collapsed, he lifted up a large piece of the shattered roof with his bare hands and threw it to the side. Save him, quickly save Sir Ren, Tao Jiyuan shouted at the other winged cavalry warriors who were rushing over. Sir Ren, are you all right? Sir Ren? Tengji was also shouting at the pile of broken wood. One after another, the rest of the people came over to help. They threw out the broken wood and dug towards the location of Rinpoche's bed. At this moment, Rinpoche's mind was in a mess. The beam of the wooden house was broken from the top, and the other end was supported by the collapsed wall. It was just enough for him to hide inside and not suffer any injuries. Even so, his heart was beating rapidly. Did he encounter an earthquake? If it wasn't for his good luck, he would have died here. As he thought about it, Rinpoche curled his body into a ball and didn't dare to move in the darkness. When he heard the shouting outside, he immediately shouted loudly. After a while, Rinpoche was dug out from the inside with dust all over his body. Looking at the starry sky and the surrounding torches, a feeling of surviving a calamity immediately welled up in his heart. Sir Ren, your luck is really good. You actually didn't suffer any injuries. After checking Rinpoche's body, Tao Jiyuan finally felt relieved and smiled. Tengji and the rest were also relieved. I also feel that my luck is really good. Rinpoche sighed. Out of so many wooden houses, only mine collapsed. Fortunately, nothing happened to me. It can be considered a blessing and a misfortune. Initially, I didn't believe you when you said that you would be unlucky after seeing a bichi. Now, I somewhat believe it. Rinpoche continued. So Rin saw it? Tao Jiyuan was surprised. It was scarlet red, about this big, had a pair of wings and very small eyes, right? Rinpoche gestured and said. Just now, before the lights went out, I don't know why it ran in through the window. It stared at me for a while before running away again. When everyone heard Rinpoche's words, They all had a weird expression on their faces and took a step back. After a long time, Tao Jiyuan said with an ugly expression, "Sir, the one you saw is called a bichi. It's even rare. Usually, bichi are gray in color and represent misfortune. But the one you saw is extremely rare, which means that fortune and misfortune depend on each other." Indeed, fortune and misfortune depend on each other. Ren Baqian thought of his encounter just now and deeply agreed. If he didn't see that little guy, he reckoned that the house wouldn't have collapsed. Otherwise, why would his house collapse out of all the houses in the surrounding? But even though the house collapsed, he was actually unharmed. The phrase, fortune and misfortune depend on each other, was not wrong at all. But the people in the surrounding only have misfortune and not fortune. Tao Jiyuan continued to add. What do you mean? Exactly what I meant. Fortune and misfortune depend on each other. But during this period of time, the people around you will only encounter misfortune and not fortune. Tao Jiyuan's expression was ugly. Ren Baqian looked at the surrounding and finally understood why the people in the surrounding retreated. He also understood why Tao Jiyuan and Tengji's expressions were so ugly. Chapter 166. That's the meaning of the words. Fortune and misfortune go hand in hand with each other. However, during this period of time, the people around you will only encounter misfortune and not fortune, Tao Jiyuan said with an ugly look on his face. Everyone looked at Ren Baqian as if they were looking at a pile of feces. Ren Baqian turned his head to look at the people around him and thought that this couldn't be true, right? Then he pointed to the distance with an innocent face and said, "There's a fire, let's put it out first." Everyone turned to look at the kitchen that was on fire not far away, then turned to look at Ren Baqian and took another step back. The guards in the distance had already rushed over to put out the fire. Now even Ren Baqian felt that it was too strange. However, it could also be a coincidence. He hoped that was the case. Otherwise, how could he return to the city with the attribute of a jinx? Just now, it was only a very small earthquake that stopped in less than a minute. Everyone waited for a while and seeing that nothing happened, they went back to rest in twos and threes. Ren Baqian's residence was changed to the wooden house that Tao Jiyuan originally stayed in. Tao Jiyuan ran over to squeeze in with Tengji and the other winged cavalry warriors. Now he was unwilling to sleep in the same house as Ren Baqian. Ren Baqian slept in the house that Tao Jiyuan slept in previously. He was on tenterhooks for half a day, afraid that something would happen again. After a long time he fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, everyone started to pack their things and prepared to leave the mountain. In fact, there wasn't much to pack. However, Tengji specially asked for a tree bark rope from the guards and tied it around Ren Baqian's waist. If it was before, he would only be a little worried. However, after the incident with the bichi, his worry had escalated from a little to a lot. If anything happened to Ren Baqian, they would really only have misfortune and no fortune. As they walked out of the mountain, other than an extremely skilled winged cavalry warrior who walked in front of Ren Baqian and Tengji who followed behind, everyone else stayed far away. Especially Tao Jiyuan, he had already hidden at the back. I feel that there should be no problem. It's not like the Grim Reaper is here. They had already walked more than half of the mountain path. After the initial nervousness, Ren Baqian gradually relaxed. Even if the bichi really brought bad luck to people, it wouldn't be so immediate and frightening. However, Tengji didn't know what the Grim Reaper meant. His words couldn't make the other party relax. "Sir Ren, as long as we leave the mountain, there will be no problems," Tengji said. Ren Baqian and the others heaved a sigh of relief as they walked through this section of the mountain road while trembling with fear. Fortunately, it shouldn't be that serious. Ren Baqian turned his head and smiled. Even though everyone said so about the bichi, Ren Baqian was still a little skeptical after the two incidents that happened last night. Even though Ren Baqian had transmigrated and seen the Kirin before, he still instinctively didn't believe in such mysterious things. This was the result of the education he had received and the habits he had cultivated. Just as Ren Baqian was speaking, a shadow suddenly covered his entire body. Tengji's facial expression immediately changed. He pulled out his long saber and leaped towards Ren Baqian's head. His speed was so fast that Ren Baqian almost didn't have time to react. The people at the back could see a huge bird with a wingspan of 7 to 8 meters rapidly descending from the sky. It extended its sharp claws and pounced toward Ren Baqian. Tengji slashed out with his blade and blood rained down from the sky. Soon after, the bird let out a miserable shriek and fell to the ground. The entire bird's chest and abdomen were split open by Tengji's blade. The contents of the bird's stomach splashed all over Rinpoche's head and face. Rinpoche happened to raise his head to look and was splashed by the liquid. He almost vomited. "Sir Rin, are you all right?" Tingji turned around and looked at Rinpoche after he landed on the ground. Rinpoche wiped his face, pulled out a handful of internal organs and threw them to the ground. The stench went straight into his nose and his stomach felt like it was overturned. "Water, water!" Rinpoche hurriedly shouted. Immediately, someone passed him a water bag and let him splash his face. His body was still covered in blood, but Rinpoche finally felt that he was alive again. Just now, he almost thought that he was going to die from disgust. He hurriedly found a small stream nearby, took off his clothes and washed his body. Only then did he stand there with his pants on and let out a long sigh. "I'm sorry, Sir Rin. I was too anxious just now." Tingji cupped his fists and apologized. "It's all right. It's all thanks to you. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would be in trouble." Rinpoche waved his hand. "What kind of bird is that? It actually dared to capture a human." While walking back he asked. "It's a flower eagle. This thing usually catches wild beasts in the mountains to eat. Occasionally it will attack humans, but it's very rare. I'm afraid that Sir Rin's aura isn't strong, which made it embolden its courage to attack," Tingji said. "Does this mean that I'm too weak and easy to bully?" Rinpoche walked back and prepared to see what exactly the flower eagle looked like. When he reached the place, he saw that everyone was already plucking its feathers. "Sir, you are in luck today. This flower eagle is extremely difficult to catch and its taste is even better." Tao Jiyuan stood at a distance and smiled at Rinpoche. Rinpoche was speechless. "I was almost caught by this thing to eat and even got drenched all over my face. Is this considered a blessing for you guys?" Half of the feathers on this flower eagle's body had been plucked by the two winged cavalry warriors, but one could still roughly see its appearance. Its winged wings were 7 to 8 meters long, its body wasn't small either, it was at least 2 to 3 meters long, and its pair of claws were extremely strong. If it were to scratch a human body, it would probably leave a few holes. As for its appearance before its feathers were plucked, it should still be quite powerful. Anyway, it was now a feathered phoenix that was inferior to a chicken. "Sir, there is this in its stomach." One of the winged cavalry warriors ran over and said to Tingji. He was holding something in his hands. After washing it with water, one could see that it was like colored sand. "Sir Rin, keep this." Tingji had an envious look on his face. "What is this?" Rinpoche curiously took it and examined it in his hands. It was an extremely small granule that was only slightly thicker than sand. Under the light, it reflected a weak 5-colored radiance. "This is cloud crystal. As long as you add some of it when forging a weapon, an ordinary weapon will immediately become like a heaven-grade weapon. Not only will it be able to cut through iron like mud, it will also have various other effects. This handful of cloud crystals is enough to forge a top-notch weapon." Tao Jiyuan came over and looked at the thing in Rinpoche's hands with an envious look. If this thing was in the hands of others, countless people would want to get their hands on it. Unfortunately, it was in the hands of this person, so there was no need to even think about it. Upon hearing this, Rinpoche immediately found a bag and carefully placed these cloud crystals in it, afraid that he would miss out on any of them. At the same time, he ran over to the flower eagle's stomach that the winged cavalry warrior had cut open. It was at least the size of a few fists, and at this moment, it was completely empty. Even though he had no use for this thing, it would be good to gift it to the Empress when he returned. Or perhaps he could sell it for a large sum of money. Or perhaps he could bring it back to Earth for examination? Perhaps it could even have a greater use. This cloud crystal is extremely rare, and I don't know where this flower eagle found it. Perhaps it swallowed it into its stomach to aid in grinding and digesting its food. If we know where it found this cloud crystal, we might be able to find even more of it, Tingji said somewhat regretfully. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.